Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're venturing deep into the haunted highways of Texas, where the road never sleeps and something always follows. From silent headlights that never pass to figures standing still in the median for miles, these 20 true stories of truckers followed after midnight will chill you to the bone. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. So. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started. And something is still behind you. Now, let's dive into the darkness. Ricky Dawes had driven the same stretch of US 281 more times than he could count. He was a night hauler, always had been, and he liked it that way. The roads were emptier after midnight, the way stations less curious, and the radio static kept him company just fine. But something about that particular night in early April made his knuckles stay white around the wheel. The night air had a bite, even though the day had been warm, and the kind of moon hanging over Burnett County wasn't full, but thin and crooked. Like a blade, just enough light to turn shadows into shapes your eyes couldn't explain. He'd picked up a load of pipe fittings from San Antonio around dusk and was headed north to Wichita Falls, same as always. It was just after 1 a.m. when he saw the figure for the first time. He was coming out of the shallow curves past Marble Falls when the median widened and the headlights washed over the grassy strip between the northbound and southbound lanes. That's when Ricky saw him, a man, just standing there in the median, still as a mile marker, wearing something dark. No flashlight, no car, just him. Ricky figured maybe the guy had broken down or was waiting for someone. He glanced in the mirror. The man was gone, not walking, not moving, just gone. He rubbed his eyes and shook off the feeling. Lack of sleep could do that to a man. He'd been running loads 6 nights straight with only gas station coffee and sunflower seeds keeping him vertical. Probably just his mind trying to make sense of shadows. But 10 miles later, Ricky saw him again, standing in the median, same spot, same posture, facing the road, no thumb out, no movement. Like he was waiting. Ricky stared a little longer this time. His eyes didn't blink. The road was straight and empty. The man wasn't waving, wasn't pacing just there. He leaned forward and flipped on his high beams, trying to get a better look. But the lights washed him out like he was made of mist. And when Ricky passed him and looked into the mirror, nothing. The figure didn't turn, didn't move, didn't disappear this time. It was just gone between one blink and the next. The CB was quiet, too quiet. He'd been used to chatter even. During the graveyard shift, other truckers, lonely dispatchers, road warnings. But now it was only static. Like the world had decided to mute itself for a while. Another 10 miles, and the figure was there again. It was impossible. The median wasn't even continuous in that stretch. There were guardrails, hills, curves. No way a man on foot could get ahead of him 3 separate times, not without a vehicle. But there he was, just standing in the grassy strip again. Only this time, his face turned slightly as Ricky passed, and Ricky saw it, pale, long, gaunt. No eyes, just smooth, stretched skin where the sockets should have been. He hit the brakes hard enough to rattle the load. The rig screeched and hissed to a stop. Dust kicked up. He reached for the dash cam, figured he'd at least catch a glimpse of the guy, but it was dead. No blinking red light, no feed, just static on the little screen. Ricky opened the door, jumped down, and ran back along the shoulder with his flashlight cutting across the median. Nothing, Just grass and gravel and miles of dark road. No man, no footprints. Not even tire marks. He didn't see the figure again until he got to Hiko, nearly 70 miles later, but he felt him. In every mirror glance, in every twitch of the CB, in the unnatural silence that followed him like bad. Whether it was in Hiko, under a busted street lamp near a closed diner, that Ricky stopped for coffee and gas. He locked his rig, walked into the old convenience store, and poured himself the strongest brew they had. The old man behind the counter was watching him, watching hard, like he knew something. "You see him yet?" The old man asked. Ricky blinked. "Who?" "The man in the median," the old guy said. "Always shows up around this time. Always when the moon's like that." Ricky didn't answer. He just stared, hand tightening around the coffee cup. "Saw him," the man said. "I can tell. Been driving long?" 18 years. Then you're overdue." Ricky left without saying another word. He didn't finish the coffee. Didn't bother topping off the tank. He just got in the truck and rolled out of Hiko as fast as the law would allow. But from that point on, the figure didn't stay in the median. He started appearing in Ricky's mirrors, just at the edge. One second he was there, the next he wasn't. Ricky stopped looking, covered the mirrors with duct tape. Didn't matter. He started seeing him in the windshield standing in the lane, then vanishing as the truck passed through. Ricky stopped answering dispatch, turned off the CB completely. He couldn't bear the silence it gave anymore. It wasn't normal. It was hollow, like something was chewing the signal down to bones. He tried to sleep at rest stops, but something tapped on the cab door every time the clock struck 2:17 a.m. Just once. Just loud enough to wake him. The first few times he jumped out, flashlight ready. Nothing. The last few, he stopped opening the door. He stopped sleeping altogether after San Saba. That was when he caught the figure riding in the trailer. He'd been at a way station just outside town, doors sealed, locks intact. Everything looked fine. But when he checked the backup camera on a whim, there it was. A man crouched low, arms long and still, pressed against the corner of the trailer. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared at the lens, skin pulled tight over a face that had no eyes. Ricky called Highway Patrol. They came, broke the seal. Opened the trailer. It was empty. Nothing inside. No prints. No signs of entry. Just air. Cold air. Much colder than it should have been for a sealed steel box in the Texas night. They asked if Ricky was okay. Took his statement. Told him to take a break. He didn't. Ricky kept driving week after week. He didn't want to stop. Didn't want to sleep. Didn't want to give that thing a chance to crawl closer. But somewhere near Jacksboro, when the moon had thinned to nothing and the highway lines began to blur, Ricky gave in. He pulled off near a field and shut the engine down. The world was quiet. Too quiet. He laid in his sleeper, finally letting the weight of weeks crush him into dreams. That's when he heard it. The knock. 3 slow taps. Driver's side door. Then the handle jiggled, then silence. Ricky reached for his pistol. It wasn't there. He kept it under the pillow. Always had. But now the space was cold and empty. He sat up, turned toward the curtain, and it opened on its own. A pale face leaned in, skin stretched tight. No eyes, but it smiled. And Ricky screamed until his throat bled. They found his rig idling the next morning. Doors locked, trailer sealed. Sleeper empty. No Ricky, no sign of a struggle. Just a steaming mug of gas station coffee on the dash and the smell of burnt rubber clinging to the seat. Now truckers say, if you drive north on US 281 after midnight, you might see him standing in the median. Or worse, he might see you, and once he sees you, he never stops following. It started just outside of Godley, Texas. Dale McMurray had finished a long Friday night hauling scrap from a busted irrigation setup off County Road 123. He was pushing close to midnight when he merged onto FM 917, heading east toward Mansfield, where his girlfriend Sandy was waiting with a pot of hot stew and that worn-out quilt he liked from her mama's cedar chest. The night was unusually still. No wind, no crickets, not even the hum of power lines when he rolled his window down for a smoke. Just blacktop stretching endlessly ahead, the yellow divider lines flashing beneath his truck like a heartbeat. Dale wasn't a nervous man. Years of driving through the night hauling lumber, livestock, and every kind of backroad trash you could imagine had thickened his skin. He'd hit deer, outrun hailstorms, and once even seen a damn tornado drop behind him on FM4 and twist an old oil rig into scrap. But that night, something felt off. It started with the lights. At first, he thought it was just another driver coming up behind him. Maybe some teenager with LED bars mounted on a lifted Silverado, or a rancher in a hurry to get back from some late auction. The beams flared up in his rearview mirror, white, glaring, high beams that didn't dim no matter how many times Dale tapped his brakes. He figured they were being rude, maybe drunk, maybe just too stupid to realize how blinding they were. So he moved to the shoulder a bit, still within the lane but offering enough room for them to pass if they wanted. They didn't. The lights stayed exactly where they were. Not too close, maybe 50 feet back, but they never changed, never swerved, never flashed. Just stayed locked behind him like twin suns boring into the back of his skull. Dale squinted, trying to see what kind of vehicle it was. But the lights were too damn bright, too sterile. Not halogen, not LED, not any kind of lighting he'd seen before. And they were silent. No engine growl, no tire hum, no vibration on the road. He turned down the radio. Nothing, just the faint whisper of his own tires and his own heartbeat ticking louder than it should. After 15 minutes, he got annoyed. Tapped the brakes again. Still no reaction. So he did what any Texan with a backbone would do. He stopped, slowed to a full halt, on the shoulder, killed his lights, sat there, waiting. The lights behind him stopped too. He waited. 30 seconds, then a minute, then 2. He opened his door, letting the cab lights spill into the dark. Climbed down with his maglite in hand. Walked toward the back of the truck. No headlights. No vehicle. Nothing. The road was empty. Flat, straight, and black. No turns for a mile in either direction. Nowhere to go. Nothing could have passed without him seeing it. Nothing could have turned around without making noise or dipping into a ditch. But those lights, the ones that had been burning a hole in his rear view, for 15 solid minutes, they were gone. Dale stood there a good while, flashlight beam flicking back and forth like it might catch a trick, a prank, or maybe a ghost. Though he'd never believed in such things. He climbed back in the truck. Locked the doors. Didn't know why. Maybe he just felt safer that way. He turned the key. Engine kicked back up. Lights on. Radio on. Jason Aldean crooning like nothing had happened. He drove. 10 minutes passed. Nothing behind him. Then they came. Back. He didn't notice them at first. They just appeared like a switch had flipped. One moment the road was empty, and the next his mirrors were lit up like a stadium had turned on behind him. Same distance. Same blinding white. Still no sound. He braked again. This time more forcefully. They didn't flinch. He pulled onto a gravel farm road and waited. Watched his mirrors. They stopped at the junction. Hung there like judgment. No movement. Just burning white. His chest tightened. His hand hovered near the glove box where he kept a Colt .45, not legal, but necessary on back roads when you haul high-value metal. He wasn't ready to draw it. Not yet. He flicked his brights in response. No answer. Then the lights just. Like before vanished. Not dimmed, not turned off. Just gone. Dale gritted his teeth. Screw this, he muttered and turned the wheel, heading east again. He picked up speed. 40, 50, 60. The air in the cab felt thick, like it was pressing in. 15 minutes later, the lights came back. They didn't ease in, no gradual approach. They just appeared, right behind him, same distance, same brightness. No sound. Dale didn't stop this time, didn't pull over. He drove faster. 70, 80. His hands tightened on the wheel. His mouth dry. Every mirror told him the same story. They were still there. He took a deep breath and did something stupid. He spun the wheel hard and did a U-turn. His tires screeched. The whole truck rocked as he fought the momentum. He stopped in the middle of the road and waited for them to pass, but they didn't. They weren't there. Again. He stepped out. Walked. 20 feet back, flashlight raised. Nothing. Flat pavement. Empty fields. Moonlight. No tire tracks. No dust. No sign of any car. No one. He stood there longer than he realized. When he got back in the truck, his hands were shaking. He called Sandy. Told her he'd be late. Maybe not coming. Made some excuse about a deer strike or a flat. She offered to come get him. He said no. He just needed to sit a while, but something didn't feel right. Not just the lights. Not just the road. Something in his body. He looked at his eyes in the rearview mirror. They looked strange. Pupils dilated. Skin too pale. His face didn't feel like his. The lights came back. But this time, they weren't behind him. They were beside the truck, floating off the ground. Not headlights anymore. Just two hovering orbs of white that burned with intensity but cast no shadow. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He tried to scream. Nothing came out. The truck engine died. His phone battery blinked red and died too. And then they were inside. Not in the truck. Not like a person climbs in. Just inside. The cab filled with light. His thoughts scattered. He remembered things he'd buried. His first fight. The dog he hit and didn't stop for. The time he left a man bleeding on the side of a bar because he owed him cash. They made him see it, feel it, over and over. Like penance. When the lights disappeared again, the sun was rising. His truck started. No trouble. No marks on the road. No sign of anything. He drove to Sandy's and ate the stew cold. Didn't say a word all weekend. The next Friday, he drove out on FM 917 again. He never came home. They found his truck idling by the side of the road. Empty, driver's door open. The cab light was on. Mirrors shattered. No footprints, but for 2 hours that night, people reported blinding white lights hovering on the stretch between Godley and Mansfield. They never passed anyone, and when they vanished, they took someone with them. It was past 1 a.m. when Wes hit the long straightaway, just south of Ural on I-35. The sky was low and smeared with clouds, moonlight barely managing to spill onto the blacktop. His rig rolled steady, humming through the dark with only the rhythmic thump of tires over expansion joints and the occasional shuffle of something shifting in the cab behind him. He'd been driving since Laredo, eyes burning, the kind of tired that made every mile start to melt into the last. The CB had been dead silent for over an hour. Even the radio gave up somewhere outside of Austin. Just static now, thick and soft, like cotton in his ears. He was used to it. Trucking at night was supposed to be quiet. He passed a faded green sign Ural, 2 miles, and that's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was just his eyes playing tricks on him. Maybe some reflectors catching weird in the fog. But the shape didn't shimmer or disappear. It got clearer as he approached, and by the time he was 20 yards out, there was no mistaking her. A girl, maybe late teens or early 20s, standing right by the shoulder next to the exit sign. Wearing jeans and a white t-shirt. No jacket, no shoes. Her dark hair hung straight and wet-looking, stuck to the sides of her face. She was waving. Not frantically, just slowly, like someone trying to flag down a friend. And she was staring right at him. Wes sat up straighter, blinking hard. Something about her face set his teeth on edge. It wasn't what you'd call scared or desperate. It was familiar. Not like he'd seen her before, no. It was the expression, that eerie sort of recognition. Like she already knew him. Like she'd been waiting. He kept his hands on the wheel and eased into the left lane, giving her space. Maybe she'd just escaped a wreck. Maybe she was high. Maybe she was crazy. It wasn't his business. He'd made that mistake once back in Oklahoma, picking up a stranded hitchhiker at 2 a.m. Turned out the guy had warrants and a tendency to spit on things. Wes learned his lesson. Keep driving. Call it in later. Let the highway patrol handle it. But as he passed her, something happened. She ran, not away. After him, he saw it in the mirror, her feet slapping the asphalt barefoot, her arms pumping. Sprinting full speed behind the trailer like she could somehow catch a semi doing 65. And God help him, she was fast. Her form didn't falter, her arms didn't flail. She looked like she was trained for it. Wes stared at her in the mirror too long and drifted over the rumble strip before jerking back. What the hell? He muttered. He mashed the gas a little harder. 65, 70. She didn't fall back. Her figure stayed in his mirrors, impossibly consistent. Her face was tilted slightly upward, and even from that far, he swore her eyes were locked on his. His gut coiled. This wasn't normal. He reached for the CB. Breaker, this is westbound, just past your L. Anyone got eyes on a girl running north on foot? Silence. More silence. Then a long, slow crackle. She wave at you first? The voice wasn't one he recognized. Old, gravelly, almost amused, Wes blinked. Say again? But there was nothing. Not even static now. Just a dead line. He glanced back again, but the girl was gone. He scanned both mirrors. Nothing but highway stretching behind him, lonely and empty. It didn't make sense. She'd been right there, he was sure of it. He even leaned forward, checking the blind spots as if maybe she ducked out of sight, but it was useless. He was alone again. He kept driving. Tried to shake it. 10 minutes passed. Then, from the passenger side, a sharp knock. 3 times, solid, right on the glass. Turned so fast his shoulder cracked. No one was there, but on the outside of the window right at eye level was a smudge. A perfect, palm-shaped smear, fingers spread wide, as though someone had just pressed their hand against the glass. He swallowed. His mouth was dry. His skin felt prickly, electric. The girl's face floated back up in his mind, the damp hair, the pale eyes. Not scared, just. Knowing. He tried the CB again. Nothing. He tried the radio. Dead. And then low and sudden, the cab started to smell. Not bad, not at first. Just strange, metallic, like wet coins or rusted water. The smell of something pulled out of a lake after. Too long. It got thicker the more he breathed, like it wanted inside him. Then came the sound. A faint rasping, like wet cloth dragged along vinyl. It came from the bunk behind him, then from the glove box. Then from somewhere below the dash. Wes gritted his teeth and tried to keep calm. He wasn't a kid. He'd done long hauls since the mid-90s. He'd seen everything from bloody deer still, flopping on the shoulder, to wrecked vans full of bodies, fresh and covered by tarps. But this was different. This felt personal. The smell vanished just as fast as it came. The knocking didn't return. The radio blinked back to life with a country song halfway through the chorus. Wes exhaled. Maybe he'd imagined it all. Maybe the lack of sleep finally got to him. He made it to Waco by sunrise. Pulled into a truck stop off Valley Mills. Got himself a coffee and tried to ignore the stares from the counter girl. When he went to the restroom, he saw what she'd seen. There were muddy footprints on the side of his. Rig. Small. Barefoot. And they started right under the passenger door. Later that week, he told a mechanic buddy about it over beer. The guy paled halfway through and said he'd heard a similar story from another driver, different stretch of I-35, same girl, same run. Always near Yarrow. She was in a wreck, the guy said finally. Back in '94, flash flood swallowed her car whole right off the road. Her body never got found. You probably passed her sign. Wes shook his head. She was on foot. Yeah, the guy said. She always is. But they say if you stop and pick her up, you don't get far. Either you vanish off the road too, or they find your truck still idling at a stop somewhere. Doors wide open. No driver. Just wet footprints on the floorboards. Always barefoot. That night, Wes didn't sleep much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her again. Standing still by the side of the road, waving like she knew him. And when he opened them, he swore the passenger mirror always had just a little fog on it, like someone had breathed on the glass. He first noticed it outside of Converse, not far past where Loop 1604 intersects with FM 78. That stretch of road always made him a little uneasy at night. Something about the dead quiet of the brush beyond the fence line and the way the darkness settled heavier there, like it had weight. Danny had been running long hauls for 23 years, and Texas highways had shown him plenty dust devils, coyotes too bold for their own good, and more than a few drivers who shouldn't have been on the road. But that night, what he saw in his side mirror made the hair on his arm stand on end. It was a Freightliner. Looked like an older Cascadia model. No markings on the side, no company name, just matte gray and weather-worn. It had come up behind him like it had been conjured out of the dark. 1 minute, Danny was alone under the stars, his own headlights the only light for miles. The next, there were high beams cutting across the inside of his cab like searchlights. Too bright, too close. He eased over slightly, thinking maybe the guy was trying to pass, but the rig didn't move. It just held position, maybe 20 feet off his rear, hugging the center line like it was welded there. Danny squinted into the driver's side mirror, then the convex, then leaned over to peek into the passenger one just to be sure. No movement in the other cab. No glow from a GPS screen, no outline of a driver, no cab light. Just darkness in the windshield. Too dark, unnaturally dark. Like the truck behind him was hollow. He told himself to relax. Probably the guy had the dash lights off, maybe riding in silence. Not unheard of. Some haulers got twitchy in the late night hours and tried to keep it zen. No lights, no distractions. But even then, you'd expect to see something, a shape. A hand move on the wheel, the glint of eyes catching a stray reflection. There was nothing in there. Nothing at all. He let it ride for a few more miles, trying to focus on his own lane. He played with the radio but couldn't settle on a station. Just static and strange whispery bits of country and Tejano bleeding together like some half-formed nightmare soundtrack. He kept checking his mirrors. That rig didn't budge. Every slight curve, every hill crest, it followed in perfect step. It wasn't tailgating recklessly, just too precisely. Like it knew exactly what he was going to do next. Danny's hands started to sweat. He told himself he'd pull off near Randolph if it was still there. He could take the access road, maybe even swing into the Shell station, just to shake the thing off. But when he took the ramp near Lower Seguin, the truck did too. Still no sign of a driver. Danny's gut turned cold. His rational mind was spinning, trying to figure some trick of angles, maybe tinted glass. But no mirror, no vantage point. Nothing showed a soul behind that wheel. He pulled into the Shell station, cutting his lights, slowing to a crawl past the pumps. The other truck followed. When he stopped beside the fuel island, it stopped behind. Him perfectly aligned, not an inch off. He watched in the mirror. No one got out, no hiss of brakes, no slam of a door. Just idling silence. He sat there, engine running, heart pounding. Finally, he opened his door and stepped down. The night air was thick and warm. Crickets, nothing else. He walked slowly toward the other rig, staying on the edge of the parking lot lights. As he got closer, he noticed the engine wasn't making any sound. It wasn't running. But he could have. Sworn he'd heard it just seconds before. He circled around to the driver's side. Still no movement. He knocked on the door. Hard. Nothing. Then he saw it on the inside of the windshield, written in the condensation in huge smudged letters. Stop following. Danny staggered back a step. He blinked, tried to convince himself it was a prank, some elaborate late-night joke. But when he looked again, the message was gone. The glass was bone-dry. He turned to get back to his own truck. The lot behind him was empty. His rig was gone. Not moved. Not parked somewhere else. Gone. Just the wide stretch of pavement and a burned-out light flickering above a dead pump. He stood there, heart beating like a jackhammer in his chest. He turned back to the gray Freightliner. The cab was open now, just slightly. The driver's door cracked. He didn't remember hearing it open. Danny stepped back again, slow. He reached for his phone, but his pocket was empty. No phone. No keys. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting for someone. The Shell building was dark. No clerk, no customers. No cars at the pumps. He hadn't noticed how empty it was until that moment. No road noise. No other headlights. It was like the world had gone still. Then the cab door creaked wider. He ran. Not toward the road. He didn't know why, but he felt if he went to the road, he wouldn't come back. Instead, he ran behind the station into the mesquite and scrub. He stumbled in the dark, tripped on rocks and thorny brush until he found an old deer blind, rusted and leaning. He crawled into it like a feral animal and sat there for what felt like hours, breathing through his mouth, trying to slow his heartbeat. The desert night dragged on, and eventually a pale blue touched the horizon. Morning. Birds began to stir. Distant sounds of traffic hummed to life. When Danny finally emerged, the world had returned to normal. His rig sat back at the pump like it had never moved. The gray Freightliner was gone. He didn't stop to fuel up. He climbed into his truck and drove straight to San Antonio, where he parked at the company yard and told his boss he was done. No explanation. He handed over his keys and walked out. He doesn't drive anymore. Doesn't even own a car. Moved. Into a little apartment near Live Oak. Gets around on foot or bus. Doesn't talk to many people, but he's always watching the roads, especially Loop 1604. If you ever see him sitting on the bench outside the old Baptist church, staring at the traffic rolling past, don't try to talk to him. Because if you do, he might tell you what he saw that night. And once you believe him, really believe him, there's a chance it'll start following you too. Just like it followed him. And like it always will. The first time it happened, Darren figured it was some stray cat or maybe one of the neighborhood kids playing a joke. He'd just gotten back from a long haul from El Paso to Corpus, parked the Peterbilt in his gravel driveway like he always did, and crawled into the sleeper for a few hours of rest before heading inside. Sometimes he slept better in the truck than in his own bed. Years of life on the road had rewired him that way. That night, he just closed his eyes when it came. A soft knock. Not a bang, not pounding. Just a polite little knock-knock. Right on the sleeper door. Like someone was trying not to wake him, but still wanted his attention. He opened the curtain and peered out through the window on the passenger side. The porch light cast a pale yellow cone over part of the truck, and beyond it, the quiet street of Oakview Lane stretched under the midnight sky. No movement, no kid giggling from behind a bush, no cat darting across the yard. Nothing but stillness and the gentle hum of distant crickets. He waited. Another knock, same rhythm. Knock. Knock. He jerked the door open and stepped out in his boots, scanning the side yard. Still nothing. He circled the truck with his flashlight, even checked underneath. Empty. He didn't mention it to his wife, Annie, when he finally came inside an hour later. She was already asleep, and he didn't feel like explaining how he just stood out there like a fool, whispering, "Who's there?" to the shadows. He chalked it up to a dream or exhaustion. But then it happened again. The next night, same knock. Same time, 12:08 a.m. It wasn't just the driveway either. 4 nights later, while parked behind a gas station off TX 44 near Alice, it came again. Knock, knock. Right on the sleeper door. And when he opened it this time, fast, no hesitation, there was only the vast empty lot bathed in fluorescent light buzzing with moths. No wind, no figure running away. Just a creeping sense that someone had been standing there seconds earlier, too close for comfort. After that, Darren started sleeping with a tire iron next to him in the cab. The knock didn't stop, whether he parked behind a truck stop, in a rest area, or at home in his own driveway, it came. Same time, same exact knock. Soft, intentional, measured. He tried staying up one night, thinking maybe he'd catch whoever was doing it. But he nodded off around 11:30 and snapped awake with a jolt at 12:09, just in time to hear the last fading tap on the door. He told Annie a few days later. She laughed at first until she saw how serious his face was. She offered some rational explanation, maybe someone targeting trucks, maybe some kind of prank. Darren didn't argue, but he didn't believe it either. Something about the knock felt wrong, not mischievous, not threatening, just wrong. Like it didn't belong in this world at all. One night in Kingsville, he parked in a dirt lot behind an old diner he used to stop at in the early 2000s. It had long since gone out of business, but he still liked the quiet of that place. Around midnight, he set up a camera on his dash, angled toward the sleeper door. He hit record, left a little light on, and waited. As always, he drifted into that half-sleep truckers know too well, one eye open, one ear trained to every creak and bump. At exactly 12:08, he heard it. Knock, knock. This time, a third one followed after a pause. Knock. He jumped, yanked the curtain back, and flung open the door. Nothing. Same emptiness, same silence. But the air felt charged, like the seconds before a storm, even though the skies were clear. He reviewed the footage in the morning. The knock wasn't on the audio. The camera showed nothing, not even Darren sitting up when he heard it. Just static for 30 seconds between 12 hours 8 minutes and 1 second and 12 hours 8 minutes and 31 seconds. And when the footage resumed, he was already standing outside, looking around with the tire iron in hand. He checked the timestamps. They were right. He checked the battery. Full. The camera had just blinked out. As if something didn't want to be seen. The next few nights, he didn't sleep. He drank more coffee than usual. Annie started noticing the change. Dark circles. Nervous tics. He'd look out the window of their bedroom every night, staring at the parked truck like it was going to vanish, or explode, or open its door on its own. Then, one morning, she asked him carefully if he wanted to stop driving for a while. Take a break. He agreed too quickly, but the knock didn't stop. It just moved. It came on their front door the following night. 12:08. Soft. Knock. Knock. Annie screamed. Darren ran to the door and threw it open, but the porch was empty. He stepped out barefoot and scanned the yard. Then he noticed it. The gravel around the truck was disturbed, like someone had been pacing in circles around it for hours. And on the passenger side window of the cab, a smudge. A perfect outline of a small hand. It was too small to be his or Annie's. That night they stayed at a motel in town. No truck, no house, just a clean bed and deadbolt locks. At midnight, they sat up in bed, holding hands, staring at the door. At 12:08 exactly, it came again. Knock, knock. From the bathroom. Annie clutched his arm. Darren got up, his legs trembling. The bathroom light was on. He'd left it that way out of some stupid logic that light kept things at bay. He pushed open the door. The mirror was fogged over, like someone had taken a hot shower, but neither of them had used it. And scrawled into the condensation, in a child's messy hand, were the words, "You took a chime, they checked out at dawn." Darren didn't sleep for 3 days after that. When he finally returned to the truck, needing to make a run to Laredo to cover a payment, he did it reluctantly. He drove in silence. The radio crackled with interference every time he passed mile marker 91 on TX 44. That's where the accident had happened a few months earlier. A runaway truck had slammed into a family's minivan. Everyone died, except the toddler in the back. He vanished from the scene. They never found his body. Darren had passed that wreck. Slowed to look. Even thought about pulling over, but didn't. Too many delays already. Too many miles to go. He hadn't thought about it since until now. That night. The knock didn't wait for 12:08. It came early. Just after 11:30. Louder this time. More frantic. He opened the sleeper door, and there, finally, stood something. Not a man. Not quite a child. It was small, pale, and wet. Its skin shimmered like something left too long in water. Its eyes were too large, too dark. And it just stood there, head tilted, as if waiting. Darren didn't move. He didn't scream. He just stared. The thing raised one hand and pointed behind Darren. He turned. The inside of the cab was filled with fog. And in the mist, he saw another figure, smaller, crawling over his bunk, smiling. The door slammed shut behind him. Annie never saw Darren again. The truck was found idling on a shoulder near mile marker 91. Empty, lights on. Sleeper door wide open. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just one thing left behind, a tiny wet handprint on the steering wheel. It was just past midnight when Ethan Devlin turned onto State Highway 6, the long and empty stretch of blacktop running between Bryan and Hearn. The summer heat still clung to the pavement like it was trying to hold the day in its teeth, even though the sun had long since fallen. Ethan had the window down, elbow resting on the ledge, letting the humid wind whip through the cab of his 06 F150. The dashboard lights glowed a soft green, casting shadows on his hands and the tattered piece of paper with the last of the route scribbled in his messy handwriting. He wasn't supposed to be out this late. Not really. He'd finished his drop in College Station and should have just checked into a motel for the night, but there was something about the drive, something about being alone on the road when everyone else had tucked in behind locked doors that made him feel untouchable, as if the night itself belonged to him. The radio was dead quiet. Not off, just tuned to static. He hadn't noticed when it happened. 1 minute it was playing some AM gospel station out of Waco, and the next it was just that low white hiss, like breath through teeth. He didn't bother changing it. Static didn't bother him. Better than ads or call-in shows. Sometimes it even made him feel like he was in a movie. Just him, the dark highway, and the sound of nothing. About 20 miles outside of Hearn, with only the rhythmic thrum of his tires and that gentle static filling the cabin, the radio shifted. Not a click or a pop, but a subtle slide like the air in the truck changed texture. The white noise thinned and warped, then thickened again. He turned the volume knob slightly out of curiosity, not because it was too quiet, but because something, and it felt like it was trying to form into something else. Then came the voice. At first it didn't sound like a voice at all. Just a ripple in the static, something beneath it, caught like a whisper under the breath of the machine. But it grew clearer, soft, drawn out. The cadence was off too slow, like a record dragging behind its intended speed. Leef. Ton. Arc. Ethan blinked, eyes flicking to the radio, then back to the road. One. Su. Rc. Lali. W. Uoy. His hand reached for the dial, fingers brushing the plastic, but he stopped. He wasn't scared, not then. Just puzzled. He focused on the words, listening carefully, trying to piece together the kid's broken pattern. And that's when he realized the voice wasn't broken, it was reversed. He turned the volume all the way up. The whispering got louder, clearer. Still soft. And strange, but now undeniably human. A man's voice, hushed but urgent, repeating the same phrases over and over. Lliw. Uoy. Hs. Arc. Ethan's stomach tightened. Something in him twisted, like a wire being drawn too tight. He gritted his teeth and slowly, deliberately, reached into the glove box for the old cassette tape he kept for emergencies. He popped it in, muting the radio. The tape hissed to life with a blues compilation he'd recorded years ago. B.B. King flooded the cabin like a balm. It settled his nerves. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in omens. Just interference. Maybe the radio was picking up something, some prank signal or a distorted rebroadcast from God knows where. It was rural Texas. Weird radio stuff happened, but he couldn't shake the feeling. He kept driving. The road ahead shimmered in the beam of his headlights, stretching on like it always had. Nothing around him but trees and telephone poles and the occasional eyeshine of a raccoon caught in the grass. But that tension in his chest hadn't gone away. It had only grown heavier, like he was being pulled towards something. Another 10 miles passed. The truck's clock read 12:41 a.m. He slowed at a curve ahead, one he'd driven plenty of times before. A sharp bend just before the Brazos River, near the old rusted railroad bridge that paralleled the highway. The fog rolled in low and sudden, slithering over the guardrails and swallowing up the yellow lines. Then he saw them. Headlights. Coming fast from the opposite direction. He squinted. The lights weren't moving quite right. No sway, no bounce. Just barreling toward him like they were attached to something too heavy, too solid. No sound of engine, no dip in the beam. As they got closer, he realized something was wrong with the spacing. Too high, too narrow. They didn't belong to a sedan or pickup. It looked like a rig, but there was no cab. No trailer, just the lights, floating. Then they veered directly into his lane. Ethan swore and yanked the wheel hard right. His tires screamed. The truck lurched off the road and into the shoulder, the front wheel catching the edge of a culvert with a sickening crunch. He slammed the brakes and came to a dead stop, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else out. He turned in time to see the lights pass through his truck. No impact. No metal. Just light. And then they were gone. Radio hissed back to life. Louder this time. No more blues tape, just the same voice, only now clearer, faster. Still reversed, but he knew the words now. You will crash now. He sat there, hands shaking on the wheel, chest tight as a drum. The air in the cab felt thinner, the fog outside thicker. He shut off the engine, half expecting the truck not to respond, but it did. Everything still worked. Everything still ticked along like the world hadn't just shifted under him. He opened the door slowly and stepped out. The fog curled around his boots, moist and silent. He checked the front bumper, bent. The wheel well was cracked. Nothing serious, but then he heard the voice again. This time, it wasn't coming from the radio dot, it was coming from behind him. Turned, slow as a statue melting. Toward the brush on the other side of the highway, there was someone standing there, not walking, not swaying, just standing, perfectly still in the mist. Their outline was faint, more like a shadow than a man, but the face, if you could call it that, had no light, no depth, like it was turned inside out, as if it didn't belong in this world, just borrowed from another dot. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in that same static cracked whisper that had come from the radio, and Ethan didn't wait. He jumped into the truck, slammed the door, turned the key, and peeled back onto the highway, tires spitting gravel as the fog seemed to fold in behind him. The radio was screaming now, voice after voice, all reversed, all overlapping. Don't stop. Keep driving. Too late. Too late. 2. He punched the button and the radio died. The rest of the night blurred by in a haze of sweat and panic. He didn't stop again until he hit Waco, and even then he parked in the middle of a Chevron lot under 3 floodlights and sat with his back against the cab, eyes wide open until the sun broke over the east dot when he finally brought the truck in for a tire check the next morning. The mechanic looked at him funny. Said the passenger side was scraped down with what looked like burn marks, long, thin ones, like fingers, and the radio wouldn't turn on again, not even with a new fuse. Ethan never drove that stretch of SH6 again, but he kept the radio unplugged, wrapped in an old towel in the back of his closet, and sometimes, late at night, even through the fabric, he swears he hears it breathing. It was somewhere between Bracketville and Uvalde when Russell first noticed the trucks. He'd been on the road for over 9 hours, running a long-haul load of non-perishables from El Paso toward Houston. US 90 was quiet at that hour, just a few scattered lights from ranch houses tucked behind brush, and the long flat ribbon of 2-lane asphalt cutting through dark Texas country. He had the radio down low, some old country song crackling out of the speakers, but mostly he was content with the hum of the engine, the occasional bump from uneven pavement, and the distant chirp of cicadas through the cracked window. He caught the glint of headlights in his side mirror first. He didn't think much of it. Truckers were a common sight out here, and it wasn't unusual for a few to convoy loosely through the night. What did seem odd was how close they rode together. The second mirror confirmed it. 3 trucks, identical in shape and height, with the same squat noses and boxy rears. Russell squinted, leaning closer. All 3 had the same paint job, faded blue with a streak of rust on the left side of the hood. But that wasn't the weirdest part. Each one had the same dent, just below the passenger door, like they'd all hit the exact same thing in the exact same way. He tapped the brake lightly, just enough to let them pass if they wanted. They didn't. They just stayed behind him, perfectly spaced, like shadows mimicking his every move. No lane changes, no high beams, no passing attempt. He checked the plates, or tried to. None of the trucks had any. That was when something inside him shifted. A little knot formed in his gut, a quiet suggestion that something was off. He picked up his CB and asked, casually, "Convoy behind me on 90, Any of y'all tuned in? Static, no voice, no chatter. Just the empty hiss of a dead frequency. Russell frowned and glanced again in the mirror. Still there, still free, still identical. His hands tightened on the wheel. He passed a lone gas station near Klein. It was closed, dark, but the lot was big enough to pull into if needed. Russell debated stopping. Maybe just let them pass, watch them from the lot, see where they go. But a flicker of fear held him steady. He didn't want to be the one to stop first. He rolled through Uvalde around midnight. The town was half asleep, glowing soft under the street lamps. For a moment he felt relief. If they were going to pull something weird, they'd back off in town, right? But they didn't. They stayed behind him. 3 matching trucks, same dents, no tags. No lights on inside. The cabs either. Like no one was driving them. At a red light, he finally got a clean look through his side mirror. The lead truck behind him had something on the windshield, something smeared, like mud or... No, it looked more like handprints. Smudged prints. Pressed from the inside. He blinked, leaned closer. And that's when the headlights blinked. Not turned off, blinked. Gone for a second, then back. Not a flicker. Not a fault. Like eyes closing, Russell's scalp prickled. He took the next left off the highway, sharp and sudden. The turnoff was a rough gravel road leading to a rancher's field, one he knew from past runs when he needed a quick piss break. His tires skidded slightly. The trucks behind followed. All 3, instantly. No delay. Now off-road, Russell finally stopped and yanked up the brake. He jumped out, boots crunching in the gravel, and turned to face the convoy. Nothing. There was no dust trail, no engines rumbling, no headlights burning. The road behind him was empty, flat gravel, silent under the moon. His mouth went dry. He stood there for a minute, 2, scanning every angle. The field was open. There was nowhere they could have gone. No trees, no hidden paths, no ditch deep enough to swallow 3 rigs. Shaken, Russell climbed back into his cab and locked the doors. The next few hours were uneasy. He got back on the road, chewing sunflower seeds to stay calm, eyes flicking. To his mirrors every few seconds. No trucks, not a single one. But when he stopped for fuel in Hondo just after 2 a.m., he caught something strange on the security camera feed above the pumps. As he filled his tank, the screen on the pump, one of those newer ones with ads and local updates, glitched, then flickered to a black and white live feed, and there they were, 3 trucks behind him in the frame. Parked directly across the street, idling quietly, he turned around. Heart pounding. Nothing. The street was empty. He looked back at the screen. Gone. No feed. Just ads again. Weather in San Antonio. Traffic updates. He didn't sleep that morning when he made it to his delivery stop on the outskirts of Houston. Too wired, too unsettled. The warehouse guy took one look at him and said he looked like hell. Russell almost laughed, but didn't. He couldn't explain what was wrong. That night, in his driveway back in Del Rio, as he climbed into the cab to do a systems check before bed, he noticed something smeared on his own windshield. 3 faint handprints, like a child's but larger. Smudged from the inside, he turned on the dome light. The cab was empty. Then he heard it, far off at first, a low rumble. Like diesel engines. Getting closer. Russell froze, staring out at his own quiet street. He leaned forward, resting his hand on the steering wheel to steady his breath. In the rearview mirror, 3 pairs of headlights blinked on, identical trucks. Same blue, same dent. No plates. They just sat there at the end of the block, idling. Waiting. He stayed in the cab until sunrise, engine off, heart beating like a drum in a coffin. That was a week ago. Now. Every night, whether he's parked at a truck stop in West Texas, Or in the safety of his own driveway, those trucks find him. They never move fast. They never get too close. They just appear. Blink on. Sit there, waiting, he doesn't know what. 4. He's too afraid to find out. But sometimes, when the air is real still and he listens close, he swears he hears whispers over the CB radio. Not voices. Just breathing. 3 sets of it. Matching his own. It was late September, the kind of dry, windswept night that made everything along FM 170 seem more abandoned than usual. The stars over the Big Bend country were clear and close, but the moon hadn't yet climbed high enough to light the road. Joe Kirkland, a long-haul hauler out of Lubbock, had just finished a job in Presidio and was hauling empty back toward toward Marfa. He'd driven this stretch of highway enough times to know its loneliness. He always said FM 170 was a road that made you talk to yourself. It snaked between the Rio Grande and the lonely hills, cutting through a silence thick enough to make you feel like the last man on earth. That night, the silence had weight to it. His headlights cut long, clean swaths through the dark, and the only sound was the hum of his tires and the occasional rattle from the glove compartment door that never stayed shut. Around 1:20 a.m., somewhere past the ghost remains of Ruidosa and not yet to the bend near the river bluff, Joe caught something out the corner of his eye, a flash of movement on the right side of the road. At first, he thought it was a coyote or maybe a javelina. They darted across these roads all the time. But then he saw the shape more clearly. A figure, human, crawling out of the ditch like something that had been broken and discarded. He slammed the brakes so hard his trailer jolted behind him. Was on her hands and knees, her white dress streaked with dirt and blood. Her long dark hair was matted, face pale in his headlights. One arm hung limp, her elbow bent the wrong way. When she looked up, her eyes seemed to catch the light all wrong, milky, wide, desperate. Joe jumped out of his cab, boots crunching the gravel as he hurried toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay? Jesus Christ, you need help." She tried to speak, but only let out a sound like a sob stuck in her throat. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. When he got close, she grabbed his pant leg with her good hand and tried to pull herself closer. That's when he really saw the blood-thick, dark, almost black in the half-light, soaking through her dress and down her legs. It wasn't just a tumble. It looked like she'd been attacked. Joe pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911, his voice shaking as he gave the dispatcher his location as best he could. There were no mile markers out there, just scrubland, cactus, and the dark outline of the Chizos Mountains in the distance. He told them what he saw: a woman, injured, alone, bleeding. The dispatcher told him to stay with her. A sheriff's unit from Presidio was en route. 8:25 minutes. When Joe looked back down, the woman was gone. He blinked, turned a full circle. Nothing but road, ditch, brush. No sound of movement, just the cold wind picking up off the river. He called out, walking a few steps into the ditch. Nothing. He stayed on the side of the road with his hazard lights flashing until the cruiser rolled up. 2 deputies stepped out, both looking half skeptical until they saw the look on Joe's face. "I swear she was here," Joe said, voice raw. "She grabbed me. Her arm was broken. Her face, she was real messed up. I called you the second I saw her." The deputies looked around, scanned the ditch with flashlights, walked a good 50 yards in either direction. No blood, no prints in the dirt, no torn fabric, nothing. "You been drinking tonight, sir?" One of them asked without accusation, just doing his job. "No, hell no. You think I imagined that?" "She touched me." They asked him to sit down and breathe. Asked if he wanted to file a formal report. He did. They humored him, took his statement, and told him they'd log it, but it probably wasn't anything. One of them said, This road gets to people at night. Lot of stories about women. In White down here. Joe didn't sleep that night. He parked at a rest stop near Marfa and sat in his cab until dawn, going over it again and again. He hadn't imagined it. He knew what he saw. When he finally got home to Lubbock, he noticed something strange. There were faint bloodstains on the right leg of his jeans, just above the boot. He hadn't noticed in the dark. And the fabric felt stiff there, like it had dried out. He washed the pants twice. The stains didn't come out. A week later, Joe found himself back down near Presidio, another job, another late night haul. This time he avoided FM 170, took the longer. Looped through Alpine instead. But curiosity clawed at him, and on his way back up, with daylight on his side, he detoured back onto 170 and stopped at the same stretch of road. He walked the ditch, now overgrown with cactus and wild sunflowers. And he saw something. Half buried in the dirt was a shoe. A woman's white flat, scuffed, torn. He picked it up and turned it over in his hand. There was a rust-colored smear across the heel. He looked around again, nothing. Just the wind, the chim, the ding, the dry grass, and the distant whisper of the river. He brought the shoe back to the Presidio sheriff's office. The desk deputy said he'd add it to the file, but didn't sound like he thought much of it. Joe knew better. In the months that followed, the nightmares started. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, the echo of knocking in his ears. Always 3 soft raps, like fingernails on glass. And sometimes he'd dream of the woman, not as she had been that night, but cleaner, whole. She'd be standing on the side of the road, arm extended like she was hitching a ride. Always staring at him. Sometimes when he drove through West Texas alone at night, the radio would go to static for no reason. And if he didn't switch it off fast enough, he'd hear breathing slow, raspy, like someone was dying on the other end. One night near Shafter, the headlights cut across the dark, and there she was again. In the ditch, crawling. He didn't stop. He didn't call anyone. He didn't even slow down. He drove until the sun came up, and didn't speak of it again. Until the day they found a shallow grave half a mile from that same ditch. A local rancher's dog had dug up part of a femur. Forensics said the body had been there for years, maybe decades. A woman in her mid-30s. Cause of death unclear. No ID. No dental match. The Presidio sheriff asked Joe to come in and look at something. He didn't tell him what. It was a photograph. A facial reconstruction. Pale skin, long dark hair. Dead eyes. Joe couldn't speak. He just nodded once and then got up and left the office. He never drove FM 170 again, but sometimes, even back in Lubbock, he'd wake in the middle of the night to the sound of something dragging outside his window. Something slow. Something deliberate. And he knew she hadn't just needed help. She'd needed a witness. Someone to carry the story. Someone to remember. And he did. Every damn night. The rain was light that night, just a mist you could barely see in the headlights. It glazed the black top like a film of oil, and the old state highway looked more like a ribbon of ink stretched through the South Texas scrubland than an actual road. Glenn Harrow was hauling south out of Floresville just past midnight, running a late run for a farm supplier that had stiffed him before and promised a double rate if he could get the pallets of feed down to Rio Grande City before dawn. It was the kind of money he couldn't say no to, not in this economy, and not when the last 3 jobs had fallen through. So he took the lonely Route S H97 figuring it'd shave a half hour off his time if he could stomach the 2-lane drive through nothingness. Glenn was used to the dark. He'd been a trucker long enough to know the patterns of the road, the way rabbits darted out like idiots, the way fog settled low in the hollows, how sometimes even the stars disappeared, leaving you feeling like you were driving off the edge of the world. But that night, Something was wrong. He didn't see the usual things. No deer, no possums, no occasional coyote eyes flashing back at him from the weeds. Just silence and rain and that kind of oppressive black that soaks into your windshield and makes you wonder if the lights are even on. He first spotted the cattle truck just past the junction to SH-72, a faded, rust-bitten rig parked sideways across both lanes like it had jackknifed and no one had bothered to move it. It wasn't a modern trailer either. The thing looked ancient, like something out of a black and white western, with wooden slats barely holding together and metal panels rusted through in spots like something had been clawing its way out from the inside. The paint had long since flaked off, but Glenn could just make out the faint outline of lettering. R. Doolin and Sons, Est, 1927. The number plate had no digits, just rust. Glenn slowed, thinking maybe he'd stumbled onto a wreck or some backwoods ranchers busted. Load? But there was no hazard blinkers, no reflective cones, not even skid marks. Just the truck, sitting there like it had been waiting. He crept closer, leaned forward in his seat to get a better look. That's when he saw the cattle. They weren't moving, not chewing, not shifting. Just standing there inside the trailer, heads too low, necks bent at angles that weren't natural. Dozens of them, all longhorns. Their antlers scraped against the roof or pierced through the slats, and their eyes, the ones near the back, near the broken parts, were open wide and glassy, but they weren't dead in the usual way. There was no collapse, no bloat, no stink. They looked preserved, like mannequins with hides stretched over bone. Glenn braked to a full stop 20 feet from the rig. He rolled down his window halfway, sniffed the air. No smell. Not even manure. He hit his brights. That's when he realized the worst part. The truck had no cab, just the trailer, sitting on the road with no engine, no hitch, nothing to tow it. Just the load, perfectly balanced like it had been lowered there by a crane. But there were fresh tire tracks in the road behind it, leading out of the fog, into the weeds and ending in nothing. His skin went cold. He thought about calling the sheriff's office, but his phone had one bar and no signal. Typical. He tried the CB, clicked it twice, listened to static, then nothing. Not even the usual chatter from oilfield hands or night haulers out of San Antonio. He felt isolated, like someone had pulled a curtain between him and the world. Still, something in him needed to see. Maybe it was habit, maybe stupidity. But Glenn unbuckled, stepped down into the wet gravel, and walked up to the rig. As he got closer, he realized the wood wasn't just splintered, it was rotted, like old barnwood soaked through with rain for decades. And the nails weren't factory stamped either. They were square-headed, hand-forged, the kind you only see in museums. He tapped the side of the trailer. It sounded hollow, echoed in a strange way, like he wasn't knocking on wood but on something else. Something deeper. The cattle inside didn't flinch, didn't move. One had its tongue hanging out, stiff and dark. Another had a chunk missing from its flank, but no blood. Just an open hole like it had been scooped out and cauterized. Glenn took a step back. That's when he heard the hoof scrape. Not from inside the trailer. Behind him. He turned fast. Nothing. Just empty road, his own truck idling quietly, steam curling from the exhaust like breath. Then another scrape. This one from the far side of the trailer. Then a low grunt. Deep. Wet. He stepped around the back of the trailer. Light from his rig barely reaching that far, throwing long shadows across the rain-slick asphalt. The moment he cleared the corner, he stopped cold. A longhorn was standing in the middle of the road outside the trailer. It hadn't been there before. Its eyes were sunken, mouth sagging open like the jaw was half broken. One horn curved straight up, the other bent back into its skull, cracked in two. Flies buzzed around it, but they didn't land. Just circled like they were afraid. The cow made a sound, but it didn't come from its throat. It came from its belly, a kind of gurgling moan like a voice trapped underwater. Then another one appeared from the trees. Then two more. Then they started walking, not fast, not like a charge. Just a slow, shambling pace toward him, legs stiff, heads lolling, but somehow purposeful. Glenn backed up, hand on his holster. Not that a .38 would help if these things weren't alive to begin with. He made it halfway to his truck before he heard the trailer creak. He turned. The cattle inside were moving now, not walking, twitching, shuddering like puppets in a fit, bones snapping into new positions, limbs jerking sideways, eyes still dead but now glowing faint red like brake lights through fog. The wood slats burst open. One after another, the longhorns stepped out, silently. No hoof sounds, no breath, just wet thuds as they dropped onto the pavement and joined the others. There had to be at least 20 of them now, maybe 30, forming a semicircle. Hurting him. Glenn didn't run, not yet. Something told him not to. Like movement would trigger something worse. Instead, he climbed slowly back into his cab, locked the door, shifted into reverse. The second he moved, the nearest longhorn jerked forward, slamming its head against his front bumper hard enough to bend the chrome. He gunned the engine, cranked the wheel. Another one slammed into the side. Then another. They were surrounding him now, ramming the truck like they were trying to tip it. The headlights flickered. The radio crackled. A voice came through. Not the CB, the radio. It wasn't even on. Just a man's voice, whispering something over and over. Blood for pasture. Blood for pasture. Blood for pasture. Glenn floored it. The truck lurched, tires screeching on wet pavement. One of the cattle was under his wheels, but he didn't stop. He hit the ditch, bounced hard, nearly flipped, then cut across the field and tore through the mesquite. He didn't stop until he reached the main road near Jourdanton, where the lights came back and the radio went. Dead again. The next morning, he went back with the local sheriff. No cattle truck, no trailer, no dead cows, not even skid marks, just a patch of grass burned black in the shape of a wheel, and something hanging from a fence post, a long, curved, horn-snapped clean-off at the base, still wet with something that wasn't rain, something darker. Glenn quit trucking that day, moved to Arizona, works in a parts shop now, never drives at night, and every so often, in the quiet between customers, he says he still hears the radio whispering, not from the wall speakers, not from the shop stereo, from the horn he keeps in the back office, locked in a crate under chains and salt. And when he opens the shop alone, just before sunrise, he swears he sees headlights reflected in the window, but no cars ever pass. It was after midnight when Travis passed through Van Horn, barreling west on I-10 with a thermos of gas station coffee, a half-eaten beef stick, and the low hum of a late-night talk radio show whispering about alien abductions and government conspiracies. He was on mile 200 and something of his trip, hauling a vintage Harley in the back of his extended cab F-150 for a guy in Tucson who'd paid a stupid amount of money just to avoid getting it scratched. The desert stretched out in every direction like an empty grave, black and endless, lit only by the twin glow of his headlights and the occasional reflective sign warning about deer, rest stops, or the border patrol. He hadn't seen another soul. For 40 minutes, not on the road, not in the rear view. Just a long, flat nothing broken by flickers of rusted fence posts and the spindly silhouettes of creosote brush. The air in the cab was stale, heavy with the smell of old leather, diesel, and the sour tang of his own sweat soaked into the cloth of the seat. It was the kind of loneliness that made your skin crawl after a while. He saw the man too late. A shape, sudden and definite, standing on the shoulder with a thumb raised like some throwback to the 70s. Dark jacket, jeans, scruffy beard, no luggage. Just standing there in the glare of the high beams, unmoving, staring. Travis didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. Just gripped the wheel tighter, jaw clenched, and watched in the mirror as the figure vanished behind him in a blur of shadow and taillight haze. He'd picked up hitchhikers before. Back in his 20s, when he still believed in good karma and roadside coincidences, but not anymore. Not since Lubbock. Not since that old man with the dead eyes who never once blinked the whole ride to Amarillo. So no, he didn't stop. But 20 miles later, something made him glance to his right. The seat next to him wasn't empty. There was a man sitting there. Same scruffy beard, same dark jacket. His hands were folded politely in his lap, like he'd been waiting for Travis to finally notice. His face was pale, waxy, and too smooth in the low light like plastic stretched over bone. The eyes were sunk in, dark as sinkholes. He didn't say a word. Travis jerked the wheel hard, swerving into the breakdown lane, tires screaming against gravel, the Harley in the back thudding against its restraints. The truck skidded to a violent halt. Heart pounding, he turned to the seat. It was empty again. Nothing but a few crumbs and the crease in the vinyl. No door open, no sound of someone fleeing. Just the dry, whispering wind outside and the ticking of the engine as it cooled. Jesus Christ, he muttered, wiping sweat from his face. He reached for the thermos, found it empty, then grabbed the coffee-stained napkin on the dash and rubbed at his forehead like that would scrub away whatever the hell just happened. He figured maybe he dozed off a little, zoned out. It was late. It was Texas. The heat and silence did things to your head out here. So he drove on. Another 10 miles. Another flickering road sign. Another glance in the mirror. Then a cough. It came from the passenger seat. A dry, hollow sound like sandpaper being dragged across concrete. Not loud, not forced. Just ... casual ... and when Travis looked again, the man was back. This time, his head was tilted slightly toward Travis, his mouth curled in a faint smile that didn't reach the eyes. His pupils were like burned holes in his face, ringed with red. He smelled of old leather and something else, something coppery and wrong, like dried blood soaked into desert dirt. Travis didn't slam the brakes this time. He didn't scream. He just kept driving, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, heart trying to crawl up his throat. What ... What do you want? He whispered. The man smiled wider. Still silent, still perfectly still. Then he blinked. Just once, and it made Travis shiver all over again. They passed another mile marker. Then another ... and the man started humming. It was tuneless and low, a droning sound like a broken radio left on too long. Travis turned up the volume on his talk radio just to drown it out, but the man's hum cut right through. Not louder, just closer, like it was coming from inside Travis's own head. Then the man leaned forward slightly, and he whispered, "You missed the sign." "What sign?" Travis croaked, but the man was already gone again, vanished like steam on a windshield. Humming stopped, but the air stayed cold. Not air conditioning, cold, grave cold. Ancient and hungry. Travis drove until the sun started to claw its way up over the edge of the desert. His hands were numb, his vision blurred. He pulled into a rest stop just outside Fort Hancock, parked under a broken light, and stumbled out of the truck. He paced the lot, trying to catch his breath, trying not to puke. He splashed water on his face at the sink in the men's room, stared at his reflection for a long time, then laughed a broken, barking sound that startled a guy coming out of the stall. He stayed there for an hour, maybe more. He didn't go back to the truck until full morning. And when he did ... the passenger door was unlocked. He always locked both. When he got out, Habit, muscle memory. Ever since that gas station in Odessa where some tweaker tried to swipe. His phone. He always locked both, but it was open, and on the seat, creased into the exact center of the cushion, was a dusty, sun-bleached driver's license. Not his. The picture was washed out, the corners frayed, but the face was familiar. It was the hitchhiker. The name was worn too thin to read, but the date of death listed underneath in faded red ink said June 12, 1998, exactly 27 years ago. To the day, Travis didn't finish the job. He left the Harley at a truck stop in El Paso with a note saying, "Free to a good home." He took a Greyhound back east, kept his head down the whole ride, and never drove I-10 again. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when he's alone and the windows are shut tight, he hears humming, and he never ever leaves the passenger seat empty. It was somewhere south of Laredo, just past Carrizo Springs, where US 83 starts to feel like it slips out of time and place. Long stretches of nothing but mesquite, barbed wire, and that odd, humming silence you get out in the Texas brushlands. At night, Bobby hadn't intended to take that route so late. He'd gotten delayed on loading an Eagle Pass paperwork holdups, the usual, and by the time he was gassed up and rolling north again, the sun had long dropped behind the horizon. His dispatch app said the detour up 83 would shave 30 minutes. Off his trip to Abilene, he didn't care much for 83 at night. Too quiet. Too many wild hogs or strays darting out of the brush. Too many crosses by the roadside. He figured he'd put on some music, down the last of his gas station coffee, and make it to I-20 by dawn. The first time he noticed the lights was after Catarina. Two round white orbs in the rear view, not close, but steady. He thought little of them at first. A pickup maybe. Could have been oil field workers heading up country or a border patrol unit tailing slow. Common enough. He had nothing in the back but empty pallets and a busted vending machine frame. Someone had asked him to scrap, but then he took a hard right off. A feeder road, some little shortcut he'd used before that curved through a stretch of unmarked brush roads. It wasn't paved well, barely a road really, just cracked asphalt scarred by time and weather, but faster. And the lights followed. Same distance, same turn. Same pause when he braked. He watched them in the mirror. They didn't bounce like normal headlights. No sway, no angle shift as the truck hit potholes. Just 2 points of light unblinking, level, smooth. He tapped the brakes again. They mirrored. He turned on his hazards. The lights behind didn't change. No blink. No color. By now, he was out past any signal range, no bars on the phone. Just him, the night, and those damn lights. He took the next turn sharper, almost deliberately reckless. Dust flew up in his mirrors. The rig rattled. The lights behind matched. No hesitation, no tire squeal. Like they were tied to his rear bumper by some invisible string. Something tightened in his chest. Bobby had done long hauls for 22 years. He'd seen weird things on back roads. People walking where no people should be. Lights where there shouldn't be. But this felt different, personal, like whoever or whatever was back there wasn't just following, but mimicking. He pulled over hard at the next turnoff, killed the lights, killed the engine. Silence. His breathing slowed as the truck ticked. With heat, he waited for the other vehicle to pass him. Nothing did. He checked his side mirrors. The lights had stopped too. Bobby's fingers curled tighter on the wheel. The hairs on his arms stood straight. That wasn't how people drove, not even tailgaters. He reached under the seat, pulled out the old mag light. He kept for inspections and stepped down from the cab. The night wrapped around him like a wool blanket soaked in ice water. No sounds but the wind pushing dry grass. He walked toward the rear of the trailer. Flashlight beam cutting through the dark and jerky swipes. No car. No lights. No dust trail. Just empty two-lane road stretching off in both directions. He turned the beam behind the trees. Nothing but black. No sound of an engine idling. Not even crickets. He stood there a long moment before climbing back into the cab. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe the coffee hadn't hit yet. He fired the engine and started rolling again. This time slower. Eyes on every mirror. 5 minutes later, the lights came back. Same distance. Same smooth glide. He floored it. The engine roared and gears rattled in their casings, and the rig sped up on a stretch that didn't deserve speed. No time to think. He threw every weird turn he could remember from the map in his head, that crooked dirt fork that led around, the windmill, the forgotten road that bent like a fishhook before looping back to the main. Every time he jerked the wheel, every time he doubled back, the lights mirrored perfectly. Always the same distance, always silent, not even a shadow of the car between them, if there was a car at all. Somewhere near the abandoned way station north of Asherton. He couldn't take it anymore. He stomped the brakes, locked the wheel, and spun the entire rig into a wide U-turn across the road. Dust howled up. Tires screamed. The rear trailer fishtailed like a beast shaking loose. He stopped broadside across the two-lane, and the lights were there, facing him now. Too close. Too fast. They rushed forward, no growl of engine, no tire squeal, just those two orbs coming faster, closer, brighter. Bobby threw his hand up over his eyes as a blinding whiteness swallowed the cab. And then nothing. He woke, slumped over the wheel, the engine dead. The rig tilted into a ditch, passenger side crushed inward against an old mesquite trunk. Blood? In his mouth, the windshield spider-webbed. Airbag never deployed. No lights. No other vehicle. He stumbled out of the cab into early dawn. Pink light was breaking over the scrub, casting the landscape in washed-out colors. He staggered out to the road. Still no car. Still no tire tracks. Not even his own. The ground was untouched. No sign of the U-turn. No sign of another vehicle approaching. Like the whole road had erased itself. Or like he dreamed it all, except for the cracked ribs and the blood still on his tongue. A sheriff's deputy found him sitting on the hood. 20 minutes later, radioed in the wreck. Told him he must have fallen asleep at the wheel. Said they were lucky he didn't flip the whole damn trailer. Bobby didn't argue, didn't say anything. He didn't tell them about the lights. Not then, not later. Not when they asked why he turned the whole truck around in the middle of nowhere, but he quit the road after that, sold the rig. Started a lawnmower repair shop in Seguin. People say he's quiet now, real quiet. Never drives. Past sundown. Never takes the highways anymore. And every so often, folks say they see him outside at night, standing by his fence, staring down the road like he's waiting to see something. Or maybe trying not to, because once or twice a year, always on a moonless night, someone swears they see a pair of white lights drifting slow through the trees behind his house. They don't move like headlights, don't make a sound. Just follow whatever's in front of them. Exactly. The sun had long dipped below the Chinati mountains when Mason tipped his cap back and glanced at the sky darkening over TX 118, the long two-lane ribbon of highway that cut through the silence west of Big Bend. He was hauling a flatbed back to Alpine, running light, deadheading after a failed pickup in Terlingua where the guy never showed. Just a wide-eyed bartender at the gas station telling him, "You don't want to wait here too long after dark." This stretch eats folks sometimes. Mason had laughed, not unkindly, and asked what that was supposed to mean. The kid had just shrugged and looked toward the horizon like something might already be rising from it. Now, 40 minutes later, Mason figured the only thing this road could eat was miles. His headlights speared into the dust and the scrub, bouncing off saguaros and rocks and the occasional shimmer of heat still rising from the asphalt. Even though it had to be damn near 80 by now, the CB was quiet. No chatter, no other rigs, not even local traffic. Just him, the hum of rubber on road, and that familiar country static riding soft from the dash. He reached for his thermos, sipping coffee gone cold, when the first glow caught his eye in the side mirror. Just a puff of dust rising behind him. No big deal at first. He figured it was maybe his own tire kick-up, catching the moonlight in just the right way. Except the light was orange, almost molten, like the aftermath of a match strike. And it wasn't fading like dust should. It pulsed. Mason slowed down slightly, watching the trail build. The glowing dust didn't dissipate or fall back. It followed him like smoke, clinging to the trail behind his trailer, keeping pace no matter how fast or slow he went. He rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand and muttered, "Maybe I ought to get my eyes checked." Another sip of coffee. A turn of the knob on the CB just in case someone out there was pulling a prank. Breaker 19. Anyone else ridden near Alpine? Got some weird atmospheric mess tailing me. Nothing. Just hiss and crackle. No voices. He kept going. 10 more miles past, the land growing flatter, emptier. The mountains were behind him now, and he swore he could see all the way to Mexico if he squinted. The glowing dust didn't stop. It shifted between mirrors, a flicker of copper and ember and something else, something like a figure walking, but not formed all the way, just suggestion and light. It never crept into his headlights, always hovering just behind, just out of reach. Mason gritted his teeth and shook his head. "You're tired, that's all," he said out loud. "Ain't nothing back there but roadkill and ghosts." Then the radio blurted static, sharp like a knife across his ears. He jumped in the seat, nearly spilling his thermos. A voice crackled. "Through? You didn't bury it deep enough." Mason slammed on the brakes. The rig screeched to a halt in the middle of the dark highway, wheels groaning, his heart slamming hard behind his ribs. He stared at the radio, mouth hanging open. "Say again?" He whispered into the CB, but he didn't push the button. The radio crackled again. Then silence. Outside, the dust drifted past the cab. It wasn't glowing anymore. It was hovering, almost intentional. It curled up near the window like smoke from a dying fire, then slipped away again into the rear view. He didn't want to look, but he did, and in the mirror, something moved. Not a truck, not a car, just a long streak of ember lit. Dust stretching behind him into the darkness, and something rising from it, walking slow, like it had no bones, no weight. A shimmer of heat around a silhouette that kept reforming. Like a man, like a memory. Mason floored the gas and the rig groaned forward again. He didn't stop until he reached a lonely rest stop outside Marathon. A single light flickered over. A cracked picnic table and a busted soda machine. He threw the rig into park, jumped out, and lit a cigarette with shaking hands. No one else there. No other trucks. He walked to the back of the trailer, half expecting something to leap out, half hoping he was just tired and old and losing his damn mind. Nothing. No dust. No fire. Just night and wind and the dry whisper of desert brush. He stared out toward the highway, breathing smoke and fear. Then his boot struck something in the dirt. He looked down. There, between the pebbles and trash, lay an old sheriff's badge, blackened at the edges like it had been in a fire. Mason bent down, picked it up, and nearly dropped it again when he turned it over. His name. Etched clean on the back. It wasn't his. He'd never been a cop, never even wanted to be one. But there it was, same spelling, same last four of his SSN, just like on his rig's license plate. His head started spinning. That night, he didn't sleep. He drove until dawn. And the dust never glowed again. But a week later, parked outside a diner in Marfa, he saw it again. Just a flicker. A coil of light behind a passing car. He knew then it wasn't about the road. It was about him. And it was coming back. It started as just another long haul out of Kerrville, somewhere near dusk, the kind of dimming light that paints the Texas hill country in gold and dust. Caleb Weaver had driven FM 2691 more times than he could count. He liked the stretch of that road, 2-lane, quiet, just enough twists and curves to keep it interesting, but not enough to slow him down. That night he had an empty flatbed and nothing but time between him and Laredo. The heat was letting up, and the air had the dry breath of fall clinging to it, the kind that carries the scent of dead grass and old mesquite. He rolled down the window halfway, lit a cigarette, and checked his mirrors the way he always did. Left, right, and center. Everything looked fine. No cars in sight. Just the road unwinding behind him in a blur of tar and shadows. The first time he noticed something was wrong, he didn't pay it much attention. In the right side mirror, just. For a flicker of a moment, he thought he saw something off. A brief shape, dark and low to the ground, darting just at the edge of visibility. He squinted, leaned a little, and gave the mirror another look. Nothing. Just empty road, he figured. It was a trick of the light. FM 2691 cuts through brushy land with cedar trees and dry creeks lining the ditches. Deer popped out sometimes, even coyotes, and you had to stay sharp. So he gave it no more thought, turned the radio to some old George Strait tune, and eased his elbow back on the window edge. 20 minutes later, near the stretch just south of Camp Verde, the mirror stopped showing the road at all. Not black, not broken. It still reflected. But it wasn't the road behind him anymore. Instead, the mirror showed what looked like gravel, almost like the edge of a highway, but the angle was wrong. It was as if the mirror had frozen, locked on a single place, a single moment, and it wasn't keeping pace with the truck. In the mirror, the reflection stayed still, even as the background outside the window blurred past. Like someone had pasted an old photo behind the glass and called it a day. Caleb blinked, confused. He tapped the side mirror with his knuckle through the open window. Still nothing changed. And then it moved, not the mirror, what was inside it. Shape. Crawling dot at first, it was far off in the distance, hard to make out. A smear of black limbs dragging itself forward like a wounded animal. He narrowed his eyes and leaned closer. The cigarette forgotten between his fingers. It was a person. Small, thin, pale. Maybe a woman. Maybe a child, it was hard to tell, but they were on their stomach, pulling themselves inch by inch toward the mirror's foreground. Their arms bent backward, elbows out like a broken doll. The head twitched in little jerks, lifting every few seconds as if trying to make eye contact. But no matter how far Caleb drove, the mirror never changed. The background didn't shift. The person kept getting closer. He jerked the steering wheel, hard enough to swerve a little, catching gravel before righting himself. He reached across the cab and adjusted the mirror manually, thinking maybe it had gotten stuck somehow. But the reflection didn't budge. He checked the driver's side mirror. That one was fine, reflecting exactly what it should have been. Scrubland, road signs, a pickup truck a few hundred yards back. The right one still showed the same crawling figure, closer now. It was wearing a dress, he realized. A thin white one, torn and stained with dirt or maybe blood. The legs dragged limply behind her, and her long hair stuck to her face like it had been through a storm. She looked up and right at him. Her mouth moved, slowly, silently. Caleb swore and looked away. Sweat had started to bead along his hairline. He turned off the radio. The night had gone quiet. No cars passed him, and no lights came from behind. Forced himself to ignore the mirror, eyes forward, watching the road. That worked for a while until something tapped the passenger door. Not hard. Not like someone banging to get in. It was light. Like fingernails on steel. He swallowed hard and told himself it was a tree branch. That part of 2691 had low-hanging limbs. It could have brushed the truck. But then he remembered there hadn't been any trees in that last mile. Just open country. He looked at the mirror again. The woman was inches from the glass. Her face was pressed up against it now, distorted by the curve of the mirror. Her eyes, if that's what they were too wide, like old oil had filled them. Her mouth moved faster, frantic now. She wasn't crawling anymore. She was hanging, floating just outside the mirror's edge. Her hand rose, and the tapping came again. Tap, tap, tapped out right on cue. He stomped the brake pedal. The truck screamed, tires grabbing at asphalt. Dust clouded in the headlights as the rig skidded to a stop. He jumped out, hard hammering, and walked around to the tin. Passenger side. Nothing. No woman. No body, no blood, nothing in the ditch. Nothing on the step rail. Just the mirror. It was cracked now, though. A single hairline fracture spidering out from the center. He hadn't hit anything. He knew he hadn't, but it looked like something had struck it from the inside. He got back in the cab and sat there, breathing hard. He didn't want to look at it again, but part of him needed to, like it had become a test of will. He turned his head slowly. The mirror showed the road again, just as it should. Gravel, signs, the empty stretch lit by red taillights. Nothing wrong, until the next night. Caleb didn't drive the next day. He got himself a room at a motel in Uvalde and tried to sleep off the creeping sense of dread. He told himself it had been a stress-induced hallucination, maybe something he'd eaten. Or maybe the mirror really had gotten stuck. There had to be a logical explanation. But the next night, when he hit the road again, hauling a refrigerated trailer bound for Del Rio, the same thing happened, right about 9 p.m. on a lonely back road near Bracketville. The mirror glitched. At first, it was just static like an old TV losing its signal. It shimmered, then flickered. Then it showed the road again. And then her. She was already there this time. Closer, crawling faster. She wasn't mouthing words anymore. She was screaming. No sound came through, but her jaw stretched unnaturally. Wide, neck muscles bulging. Blood had started leaking from her mouth. Her eyes were cracked white, veins spidering through them like ice underfoot. Her nails were broken, down to jagged red stumps, and she clawed at the mirror, leaving streaks of red as she dragged her body forward. Caleb punched the mirror, shattered it clean. The pieces scattered across the road, falling into the dark like dead stars. He didn't stop to pick them up. He drove the rest of the night without looking back, but that didn't fix it. A week later, after replacing the mirror entirely, he saw her again in the driver's side mirror this time, and then in the rear view. Every mirror, every reflective surface. Store windows, sunglasses, puddles. Always the same woman, crawling closer, mouth open, arms trembling from effort, pulling herself across some invisible plane toward him. And the more he looked, the less he recognized his own reflection. His face started to disappear, just in glimpses, like her presence was replacing him inch by inch every time he checked a mirror. Now he keeps them all covered. Towels, duct tape, whatever he can use. He doesn't shave anymore, doesn't comb his hair, doesn't care, because she's still coming. And every time he dreams, he's not in his own bed. He's crawling in a white dress, bones creaking, mouth open, toward a mirror, toward a truck, and someone's in the cab, watching, just like he once did. The scream came at exactly 3:07 a.m., not 3:06, not 3:08. Ricky saw it on the microwave clock, glowing green in the dark of his sleeper cab. SH-21 was quiet that night, just like most nights in this stretch of East Texas thick woods on either side, a slow two-lane that no one drove past midnight unless they had to. He was parked off a pullout just past Dimebox, hauling an empty 53-footer back from San Antonio toward Tyler. No load, no company, no one out there but the pine trees, the whine of cicadas, and Ricky's own breathing. He'd heard it once before. That scream, same time, same voice. 2 weeks ago. Also off SH-21, but that time, he chalked it up to a dream, maybe a nightmare riding on too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But tonight it was real. The voice sliced clean through the silence like a hot knife through frozen butter. A woman shrieking his name like she was being murdered, like she'd seen something that broke her brain. Ricky! Long and hollow and impossibly close. He jumped from his bunk so fast he smacked his head on the overhead shelf. The flashlight was on the dash, cold metal against sweaty hands. He flipped the switch, and the interior of the cab lit up like a stage set, empty, still, normal. He threw open the door, boots hitting dirt. The trailer stood behind him in the dark, silver, and mute. No sound, not even frogs. That was wrong. Texas nights always had frogs, always had something making noise. Tonight felt vacuum-sealed. His first thought was that someone had gotten in. Some junkie or psycho hitched a ride when he stopped for gas in Bastrop. But that was 5 hours ago, and he'd locked the doors, both the cab and the trailer. He always double-checked after what happened last year in Laredo, the girl with the blade who'd climbed inside. When he was asleep, he'd never forget. That one. But this wasn't like that. This scream was personal. It knew his name, and that trailer had been sealed the whole time. He knew it. He walked around the back, careful with his steps, flashlight beam steady, cutting through the dark. No prints, no signs of someone walking in the gravel. The padlock was still latched on the trailer doors, and the seal was unbroken. His dispatcher would have fired him if that plastic tab had snapped. He touched it, solid. Hold dot then, again, just as he was about to turn back. Ricky. Closer dot from inside dot from the goddamn trailer. He staggered back like he'd been punched. The voice wasn't just screaming. It was sobbing now, pleading, ragged and raw and too close. He felt the ground shift under him, not literally, but in that way your brain rewires reality when something truly wrong is happening. Like the world had turned a half-inch left and you were the only one who noticed. He stood there, breathing hard, knuckles white on the flashlight. The back of the trailer gleamed dully, the steel reflecting moonlight. Silent, innocent. It couldn't be real. Couldn't be her. Not after all these years. Not after he'd buried the memory so deep it gave him ulcers. But the voice. It sounded just like her. Kara. He hadn't said her name in 10 years. Not out loud. Not even in his head if he could help it. They'd been teenagers, 19, both full of stupid dreams and dirty secrets. She'd vanished after that summer, after the night by Lake Nacogdoches. Everyone thought she'd run off. But Ricky knew better. He remembered the screaming then too. Different screaming. Real, in the flesh screaming, and blood. More than he ever thought could come from a person. He never told anyone. He lied like a preacher at a poker game. Said she took the car and vanished. Cops didn't push too hard. Kara had a record. Shoplifting, minor stuff. It made sense that she skipped town. But she didn't. He remembered her eyes going wide, mouth opening to scream one last time before the rock came down. And then nothing. Just water and mud and silence. He buried her by the lake shore in a place no one hiked. Wrapped her in that old green blanket, said a prayer he didn't believe, and drove home shaking so bad he couldn't shift gears without. Grinding them dots, so how was she screaming his name from the trailer? His hand moved to the padlock before he realized it. Unlatching it, his brain screamed not to. Every cell in his body said to get in the cab, start the truck, and drive till the tires fell off, but his hand moved anyway. As if drawn by something, stronger than will dot the door creaked open. Just one, enough to swing out halfway. Cold air rolled out, ice cold, not just chilly freezer cold. Like a walk-in meat locker. It didn't make sense. Texas nights in July don't get below 80, and the trailer wasn't refrigerated. The flashlight beam danced into the gloom. Empty. Just silver walls, a scratched up floor, and that faint whispering. He stepped in. The cold got worse. His breath came out in little white clouds. He could feel the sweat on his neck start to freeze. Ricky whispered, right in his ear. But he was alone. The door slammed shut behind him. Pitch black. The flashlight flickered once, then died. He pounded the walls, yelled. But the trailer swallowed sound like a grave. He backed up toward the doors, hands searching in the dark. Then something touched his arm. Cold, wet, fingers, he screamed, but the voice screamed louder. I was awake, Ricky. You thought I was dead, but I was awake. He turned and ran, but the trailer was too long, too dark. He tripped on nothing. Hit the floor hard. His head rang like a bell, and then she was on him, weightless but heavy, cold and wet and smelling of mud and algae. Her face inches from his, eyes white, mouth open, skin peeling. You left me there. You heard me scream and you left me. I didn't know. He yelled, but he did. He always had. She dragged her fingers down his chest. Not claws, nails, human, real, until they dug in. Cut through cloth. Then skin. He thrashed, rolled, kicked, but the trailer didn't have air anymore. No space, no light. Just her and that scream. It filled every corner of his skull. By morning, the rig was still there. Lights off, doors locked, trailer sealed. When state troopers pulled up for a routine check, they found the cab empty, the bed made, the truck keys still in the ignition. But Ricky was gone. No prints, no sign of struggle. His phone sat on the dash, screen cracked, stuck at 3:07 a.m. The trailer was sealed tight, except one thing was off. On the inside wall of the trailer, scratched deep into the steel, were the words, I was awake, and just beneath it, in smeared reddish brown, so are you. It started just after midnight, somewhere south of Corsicana on the I-45. Mason Conley had been on the road since Houston that morning, hauling a half-loaded flatbed back toward Dallas. He was running light, empty on the back half, just a few. Crates of reclaimed machine parts strapped down and covered with a tarp. The sun had gone down hours ago, but the warmth still hung in the air like sweat that wouldn't dry. Every few exits blurred into the next, the same roadside signs, the same glowing gas stations, the same cracked stretches of Texas blacktop. He had one of those cheap gas station coffees going cold in the Q folder and a bag of beef jerky on the passenger seat. Torn open and barely touched. It was around mile marker 198 when he first noticed the figure. Not in the middle of the road. Not up ahead in his headlights. It was in his periphery, off to the right shoulder, sprinting. Mason didn't think much of it at first. Could have been some kid messing around. Maybe someone broke down and was trying to wave down help, though. The guy wasn't waving. No flashlight either. Just a man running full speed parallel to the truck. Mason blinked. Gave it another second, then looked again, still there. A man in dark clothes, matching his speed, arms pumping, head fixed forward. No flashlight, no phone glow, no reflective gear. Just him, and the eyes, wide white, staring straight into the cab, into Mason. They didn't blink. He let off the gas a little, let the truck slow naturally as he coasted, thinking maybe he was overtired. But the figure didn't fall behind. It kept pace, kept looking. Mason hit the brakes just enough to drop to 55. The figure slowed too, still running, still looking. His eyes, even in the dark, still catching enough of the headlights to reflect. Back unblinking, and Mason knew what runners looked like. This man didn't move like a runner. His legs stretched too far, his arms pumped too evenly. No bounce, no fatigue. He pressed the pedal and brought it back to 65. The man kept up. Now Mason's chest was tightening. He glanced forward, then back. At the shoulder, still there, not breathing hard, not sweating, just running like a machine, like something that didn't have lungs or bones that got sore. What the hell? Mason muttered, and he turned the stereo down until the cab was filled with the hum of the tires and the faint rattle of something loose in the dashboard. He rolled the window down halfway and listened. All he could hear was the wind and the low growl of his engine. He leaned just enough to get a better look. The runner was only 10 feet away, still on the shoulder, his face dead level with Mason's window. His mouth wasn't open. His chest wasn't rising or falling, but his lips moved fast, soundless, whispering something. Mason stared, trying to make out the shape of the words. Then the man's head jerked, not turned. Jerked, like a puppet on a broken wire. One twitch, then still. Eyes fixed on Mason, lips frozen mid-whisper. Mason swerved slightly, startled, but the guy matched his movement, keeping his distance perfectly, like they were connected. A second later, the man's mouth resumed its silent movement, faster now, urgent, like he was screaming without breath. Mason hit the gas and pushed it to 70. His heartbeat roared in his ears as he glanced again. The runner was gone. He kept the pedal down. 5 minutes passed, 10. No sign of the man. Just the long dark highway stretching forward. He told himself it was fatigue. Just one of those hallucinations you hear about your brain tricking you. Highway hypnosis. Maybe he dozed off for a second and dreamed it. But deep down, Mason knew he hadn't. He rolled the window back up and tried to shake it off. Tried. Not to look in the mirrors. But around mile marker 183, something caught his eye again. Not to the side this time, behind him, the rearview mirror. Just past the shadow of the trailer, just outside the reach of the taillights. A flicker of movement. A figure, running. He leaned forward, squinting into the rearview. Too far to see details, but it was the same stride. The same straight-backed, unnatural run. Somehow, impossibly, the man had fallen behind only to reappear again. Mason switched lanes, veered around a slower car, and kept his focus dead ahead. He didn't want to look again. Didn't want confirmation. But the movement in the mirror kept flickering like a strobe. Each time he blinked, it seemed closer, as if it wasn't running at all, just jumping distances. Skipping forward. He took an exit. No real reason. Just a sudden urge to get off the highway. Pulled onto a deserted access road that ran along the back of a chain-link fence and a cluster of industrial buildings. He slowed to a crawl and came to a stop. Headlights washing over a blank loading dock. Nothing behind him. No sign of the runner. But Mason didn't relax. He sat in the cab, engine idling, both hands tight on the wheel. Then, from the side mirror, he saw movement. Not on the road this time. Next to the truck. Right outside the passenger door. The man, standing still, face inches from the window. His eyes meeting Mason's through the glass, still unblinking, still whispering. The lips moved rapidly, jittering like film skipping frames. Mason's skin went cold, his limbs locked. He couldn't breathe. The man lifted one hand, no knock, no banging, just a palm flat against the window, slow and deliberate. The lights in the cab flickered. Then the man was gone. No footsteps, no retreating shape, just gone. Mason slammed the truck into gear and peeled away from the loading dock, tires screaming against the pavement. He didn't care about the load, didn't care about the route. He drove straight north, back to the main road, back toward Dallas. Like a man being chased by the devil, the figure didn't come back that night. But the next evening, somewhere, past Fairfield, it did, running, full speed, on the side of the road. Again, every night after that, the man returned. Whether Mason took I-45 or tried a different highway, whether he hauled by day or shifted to nighttime runs, it didn't matter. The man would appear always on the shoulder, always running, always watching with those pale, lidless eyes and those silent, frantic lips. Mason stopped sleeping. Tried taking different trucks, changed jobs, took a month off. But the first night he got back behind the wheel, there he was, sometimes running, sometimes standing on an overpass, staring down. Once he appeared in the cab's reflection, not in the mirror, just the glass. Mason never told anyone. Who'd believe it? Instead, he learned to keep moving, learned to ignore the whispering. But sometimes, when the engine gets quiet and the road's too dark, he swears he hears it, not just whispers anymore, but words repeating over and over again. Keep going, don't stop. Keep going, don't stop. Because if he ever pulls over, if he ever lets the truck come to a full stop, he knows that man will stop too. Not running anymore, not watching from a distance. He'll be standing right outside waiting and Mason's not sure what happens then. Only that once, just once, he saw another driver's rig pulled off the shoulder near Huntsville, cab empty, engine cold. A set of bare footprints led away from the truck right to the edge of the woods. And there, half buried in the brush, was a man's body, eyes wide open, lips frozen mid-whisper. The CB radio let out a sharp hiss of static just as Russell Merle passed the county line marker, heading north on US 287, somewhere between Wichita Falls and the edge of Electra. His knuckles were tight on the steering wheel, his thermos lukewarm, and forgotten in the cup holder, and his eyes were blurry from too many miles without a real break. He'd been hauling livestock feed out of Fort Worth since before dawn and was still a good 6 hours from his last stop in Amarillo. The road was mostly empty now, save for a couple of battered pickups and a rust-colored sedan that had been trailing him for 20 minutes, but never seemed interested in passing. The CB crackled again. "Breaker 19, got your ears on, Rusty." He blinked. No one had called him Rusty over the radio in years. That had been his old handle, back before he started driving solo. Back when his younger brother Danny used to ride shotgun, back when the roads didn't feel quite so long and lonely. He leaned forward and tapped the mic. Yeah, this is Rusty. Who's a skin?" Silence for a beat. Then the voice came again low, like a whisper pressed right into his ear. "You're headed to Quanah for your first drop." Then Memphis, Clarendon, Dumas, final in Amarillo. Russell felt something cold press against the base of his neck. Dispatch hadn't given him the full manifest yet. They always trickled it in, stop by stop, because their system was slow and they didn't like drivers getting ahead of schedule. Hell, his Qualcomm hadn't even buzzed with the first drop yet. He stared at the CB. It was just a cheap unit, nothing fancy. He'd picked it up at a truck stop outside Denton 2 years ago. Nobody but dispatch and a few old-timers even use CBs anymore. It wasn't connected to his GPS or phone. Just radio waves and static and the occasional bored trucker with a dirty joke. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice a little sharper now. "How the hell do you know my route?" But the line was dead again. Just a long sigh of static and then silence. He kept driving. The stretch between Electra and Quanah was flat and featureless, cotton fields and windmills spinning slow like they didn't care about time. He kept glancing at his side mirrors, but the rust-colored sedan was gone. Vanished like it had never. Then there dot at 2:14 p.m., just as the sun tilted west and cast long shadows across the highway, his Qualcomm dinged. He glanced down. First drop, Quanah Feed Depot, 3:10 p.m. Exactly what the voice said. He should have called dispatch. Should have. Asked if someone was messing with him or if there was some kind of radio interference glitch. But he didn't. He kept driving, tight-lipped and wary, like a man walking into a room that smells like smoke but shows no flame. At the feed depot in Quanah, the guy at the dock was already outside waiting when Russell pulled up. Not normal. Usually they made you sit until they finished whatever break they were taking. The guy waved with one gloved hand, then held up a clipboard. "You're early, Merle." Russell climbed down, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You were expecting me?" "Dispatch sent your ETA like an hour ago." The man shrugged, handed over the paperwork. "Said you'd be here before 3. You always this punctual?" Russell didn't answer. He climbed back in the cab as soon as the unloading started and kept the engine idling. The CB was quiet. So quiet it felt wrong. No chatter, no weather updates, no bored truckers joking about state troopers or diner specials. Just silence. Until 3:41 p.m. Next stop, Memphis. Take 287 west and cut through Esteline, but mind the turn near the abandoned grain silos. The road shifts. He froze. Same voice, calm, no background noise. No call sign. He snatched the mic. "You've got 10 seconds to tell me who you are." But the voice didn't come back. He made the turn an hour later, right where the silo stood crooked against the sky, rusted through and shivering in the dry wind. The road did shift, just like the voice warned, a subtle angle that could have sent a trailer off balance if he'd been going too fast. He slowed down, barely breathing. At the Memphis drop, no one mentioned anything strange. By the time he hit Clarendon, though, it wasn't just the voice. It was the smell. His cab started to carry a faint scent, wet earth and something sour beneath it, like rotting hay or meat that had sat too long in the sun. He checked the floorboards, under the seats, even popped the hood during a fuel stop. Nothing. Just the smell getting stronger, like something invisible had crawled in with him back in Quanah and decided to stay. At 8:06 p.m. Just after sunset, the CB crackled again. "You shouldn't have stopped in Dumas. That place ain't safe after dark." Russell slammed the brakes, his tires chirping against the blacktop. He was still a half hour from Dumas. He yanked the mic. "Off the hook. I don't know who you are, but if this is some prank." The voice cut him off. "You shouldn't have left, Danny." Silence. Russell's hand slipped off the mic. His throat went dry. Danny had died on this route. 6 years ago. Same highway. Same stretch between Dumas and Amarillo. They'd stopped at a gas station just outside of Stratford, and when Russell came back from the bathroom, Danny was gone. No sign of struggle. No blood. No note. Just the cab door swinging wide and the faint sound of static playing through the CB. Nobody ever found him. His fingers shook as he drove into Dumas. The town looked off, empty in a way that didn't make sense. Stores lit from within, but no customers. A single kid on a bicycle riding in slow, lazy circles in the Walmart parking lot, never lifting his eyes. The smell in the cab was overwhelming now. Like a butcher's freezer gone out during a power outage. At the last drop in Amarillo, no one came out to greet him. The gates were open. The yard lights were on, but no one was there. He honked. He walked the perimeter. Nothing. He tried calling dispatch, but the line buzzed and dropped. No signal. When he got back in the cab, the CB flared to life. Final stops, not Amarillo. Final stop's the place you left him. Russell gripped the wheel so hard his wrists ached. What do you want? He whispered. Finish the route. The voice sighed. One last drop. The GPS flickered on, unprompted. A red dot appeared near Stratford. An unlabeled road winding behind the tree line that ran parallel to a dried-up creek bed. The same place where he'd last seen Danny. Russell didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed turn around, drive home, call someone. But the rig started forward before he even realized he'd pressed the gas. The road narrowed. The sky turned purple-black. The CB hissed and sputtered, then quieted. Then the voice said something final, and Russell never told anyone what it was. When the state troopers found his truck a day later, it was sitting in a patch of mud half swallowed by the earth, engine cold, doors locked from the inside. No sign of Russell. Only the CB still worked. It crackled to life when the tow truck driver climbed into the cab. Breaker 19, it whispered. Rusty's got a new route. The moon was bright that night. Not soft or silver like in the movies, but hard, sharp, almost surgical, like it had been carved out of ice and pinned to the sky. Its glow painted the desert in long, clean strokes, mesquite trees casting bent. Narrow shadows, the picnic tables stretching like black skeletons over the sand. Wes had driven that stretch of FM 1111 maybe 100 times in his life. Out there past Sierra Blanca, nothing ever changed except the seasons, and even those moved slow. Long miles of highway flanked by nothing but desert scrub, crumbling roadside. Memorials and the occasional jackrabbit darting across the asphalt like a ghost. He was headed north, back from a delivery run to Presidio, hauling empty pallets now and looking forward to sleep. It was a little after 2:30 a.m. when he pulled into the rest area, and not because he had to piss, not because he was tired, but because something itched in his brain. He hadn't seen a single set of headlights in over an hour, and his CB had gone. Quiet, nothing but white noise and the occasional pop like distant static thunder. That itch behind his eyes had gotten worse the farther he drove, like someone was watching him from the backseat, or like a wrong thought had been planted in his head and just left there to rot. So when the glow of the rest area lights broke the dark, he pulled off without thinking. There were no other vehicles, no state troopers, no RVS, not even a beat-up sedan with a couple making out in the back. Just the whine of cicadas and the dry smell of creosote on the air. He parked the rig, killed the engine, and stepped out. That's when he saw the man. He was standing by the last picnic bench on the left, right under one of those pole lights that always buzzed faintly and swarmed with moths. The man had one foot propped up on the concrete bench, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a cigarette that burned too slow. He wore a dark denim jacket, sleeves rolled, and his hair was slicked back neat like something out of a different decade. There was a strange stillness about him, like he wasn't just standing but had been standing there a long time. Wes gave a polite nod, the kind you offer strangers in the middle of nowhere when neither of you wants trouble. The man smiled wide and a little too slow and took a drag. His eyes didn't blink, not once. Just locked on Wes like he was watching a mouse wander into a glue trap. Wes turned his back on him and went to stretch his legs. Desert wind tugged at his shirt and hissed through the brush like it had something to say. After a few minutes of walking circles around the truck, he looked back toward the bench and froze. There was no shadow. The man's cigarette glowed orange in the dark. His arms moved, His foot tapped on the bench leg, but the pool of light under the street lamp didn't catch him. The man was standing in full light, yet there was no dark shape beneath him. No stretching figure like the one cast by the bench, the trash can, the post. Nothing. Like the light didn't know how to touch. Him. Wes blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again. Still nothing. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't tired enough to be hallucinating. He stood there a moment longer, heart thudding in his ears, trying to tell himself there was some logical explanation. Double light, sources, weird angle, an optical illusion, but the rest stop only had one street lamp working and the moon was behind him. Every other object cast a shadow, except the man. Wes tried to act normal. He gave one last stretch, spit into the dirt, and walked toward the cab like it was all routine, like he hadn't just seen something his brain refused to swallow. As he reached for the door handle, he glanced back. The man was closer now, 20 feet from the bench, still smiling. Still no shadow. Wes ducked into the cab fast, started the engine, and slammed the door shut. The dome light flickered, just once. He looked at the mirror. The man was standing just outside the reach of the headlights, still and casual, like he had all the time in the world. Wes flipped on the brights and shifted into drive. As the truck pulled away. The rearview mirror caught one last glimpse, the man tilting his head, still smiling, but now he was mouthing something. Wes couldn't hear it, but he could read lips well enough to catch the shape of the words. "I'll see you soon." He didn't breathe right again for 30 miles. By the time he reached Van Horn, Wes had convinced himself it was just exhaustion, a weird desert trick, a mirage of the mind. He checked into a cheap motel behind a gas station, drew the curtains, and tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that smile, that blank spot where a shadow should have been. He left the bathroom light on. In the morning, the rig was fine. No signs of anyone having followed him. Tires were where they should be. But there was a cigarette butt on the ground, right outside the driver's side door, unsmoked, pristine, and cold as bone. He didn't touch it. The next time he ran that route, a week later, he didn't stop at the rest area. He almost passed it. Without looking, but curiosity got the better of him, and he peeked in through the windshield. The man was there. Same clothes. Same posture. Smoking again. Still no shadow. Wes floored it. But that was only the beginning. It got worse. Over the following months, no matter where he went, Lubbock, Del Rio, even once outside Amarillo, he saw him. Always by a rest stop or a gas station or a dirt shoulder. Sometimes standing. Sometimes sitting on the edge of a guardrail, swinging. One foot like a kid waiting for a ride. Never speaking. Just watching. No shadow. One time in Odessa, Wes passed a reflective storefront window and caught the man standing behind him in the glass. When he spun around, no one was there. It became clear after the third sighting that this wasn't a man. Not really. Not someone hitching rides or messing with his head for fun. This was something else. Something ancient, patient. And then the dream started. Wes would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing the hum of that rest stoplight buzzing above his bed, smelling desert wind in his motel room, seeing that grin, wide and slow, floating in the dark like a shark in deep water. Sometimes, in the dream, he'd be the one with no shadow. He stopped sleeping, started muttering to himself. His coworkers noticed. One of them, Randy, joked about Wes finally snapping. A week later, Randy drove the same route to Presidio. He never made it back. They found his rig abandoned along FM 1111. Lights on, engine idling, door wide open. No sign of Randy, but they did find a cigarette, pristine, still burning. No footprints in the sand. Wes knew what had happened. But he didn't say a word. The last time anyone saw Wes, He was parked at that same rest area just after midnight. Another driver name was Carla rolled in behind him. She said she saw him sitting on the bench, smoking, smiling. And standing right next to him, just barely in the glow of the light pole, was another figure. Same denim jacket, same slicked back hair. Same empty space where a shadow should have been. When she blinked, they were both gone. Truck still running. Driver's side door wide open. 2 cigarette butts. Side by side. And not a single shadow in sight. He'd been driving all night, mostly on empty highways that ran straight through the brushland. The kind of no man's land you get down near South Texas. Between Raymondville and Port Mansfield, there's nothing but flat scrub, scattered oil. Pumps clicking like old bones, and the occasional lonely sign bleached by decades of sun. Dean Jenkins had been hauling freight for 17 years and knew the feel of a normal night on the road. This one felt wrong the moment dusk passed and TX 186 stretched out in front of him like a black ribbon into nowhere. There were no other headlights, no taillights, not even a possum or coyote in sight. Just his own truck humming along and the hollow sound of tires rolling over uneven asphalt. His fuel gauge had been edging toward empty for the last 20 miles. Normally he wouldn't cut it that close, but a misrouted detour and a missed exit near Harlingen put him behind schedule and off his usual fuel stop. His phone had no bars. CB was mostly static. He had the nagging sense that TX 186 wasn't supposed to be this long or this quiet or this dark. Then he saw the glow. It was faint at first, like a mirage floating in the heat waves, except it was nighttime and the air was cool. A flickering fluorescent sign rose up from the side of the road, half hidden behind a broken fence line and some tall mesquite trees. The kind of light that hums even when you're not close enough to hear it. A gas station, squat, rectangular, and oddly pristine. Too clean, maybe. The sign just said Jazz in red letters, a few bulbs blown out. There was a single pump, and next to it stood a man in denim overalls, wiping the handle with a rag. Like he'd been waiting just for Dean. Relieved, Dean pulled off, slowing into the lot. The pavement was perfectly flat. No oil stains, no gravel. No weeds poking through cracks. Just a smooth black surface that looked poured yesterday. He stepped out, boots hitting the concrete with a click that echoed louder than it should have. "Evenin'." "Friend," the attendant said with a smile too wide for his face. "You're just in time. Pump's all yours." Dean nodded. "Lucky I found this place. Didn't think there was anything out this way." "Oh, we're always here for folks who need us," the man said, still smiling. "Diesel's cheap. Tonight, $1.75. Dean blinked. "You serious?" "Dead serious." There was something off about his voice. It was calm, pleasant, but too flat. No accent, no regional twang. It reminded Dean of customer service hotlines, polite. Rehearsed, not quite human. Still, he needed the fuel. He began pumping, glancing around. The station had a lit interior, shelves lined with snacks and drinks that looked frozen in time. Not expired, just pristine. Untouched. As if they'd been set up to look like a real gas station, but no one had ever actually shopped there. He finished pumping and the meter stopped at $73.62. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet, like rotting oranges. The clerk was already behind the counter, like he'd teleported there. Dean tried not to let it rattle. "Him got a restroom?" he asked, glancing around. Round back, just past the red door. Dean paused. There hadn't been a red door when he pulled in. But he nodded, figuring maybe he just missed it. The door was there now, a steel slab with peeling red paint. Tucked behind the building, he stepped into the small concrete corridor. The lights buzzed above him. The bathroom was surprisingly clean, cleaner than most truck stops. No graffiti, no smell. Just a sink, toilet, and mirror. When he washed his hands and looked up, something flickered in the reflection, not behind him, not in the room. In the glass. For a split second, he saw himself standing at the pump again. The scene was reversed as if it had never happened. As if it was happening now. But this time, the pump handle was in the other man's hands. And Dean. Dean was the one smiling. He blinked, heart skipping a beat. The image vanished. Just his tired, stubbled face staring back. When he returned to the front, the clerk handed him change without asking. Exact bills, crisp, unfolded, the kind of paper. That felt too thick, too smooth. Thanks, Dean muttered. Appreciate it. Drive safe, the man said, smile never faltering. We'll be seeing you again. Dean didn't reply. He climbed into his cab, shut the door harder than necessary, and drove off, watching the station shrink in the mirror. Only when it was a tiny dot behind him did he let out a shaky breath. He reached the next town just before dawn, a sleepy stretch of buildings called Sarita. He pulled into a real truck stop, double-checked his receipt, and tried to make sense of what happened. But the receipt was blank. Just a piece of paper with the word gas printed in faded ink. No amount. No address. No date. The fuel was real, gauge full, engine running smooth. But everything else felt like a dream pressed between the pages of a waking nightmare. He asked the local clerk about any gas. Stations out past TX 186 toward the brush. The guy shook his head. Ain't nothing out there but wildlife reserve and some old ranches. Closest fuel's 20 miles west, Dean insisted. He described the place in detail, the sign, the single pump, the red door. The clerk looked uncomfortable. Couple drivers say they seen something like that over the years. Always the same story. Runs out of fuel, finds a light, cheap diesel, friendly guy. Next morning, nothing there. Not even tire tracks. Dean didn't sleep that day. He tried, in the cab with blackout curtains drawn, engine off, phone recharging. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that red door. Saw himself standing on the other side of it, staring out through a glass mirror that didn't show the world, only reflections. Twisted ones. Weeks passed. He avoided TX 186 entirely, even if it cost him hours of driving time. He started checking mirrors more often, staring at gas attendants just a little too long. Looking for anything strange. One night near Corpus Christi. His CB crackled. Evening, friend, a voice said. Pump's all yours. Dean slammed on the brakes in the middle of the empty highway, tires screeching, heart thudding. He looked around. There was no station. No pump. No light. Only blacktop and wind. The CB hissed again, softer this time. We're always here. For folks who need us. He yanked the battery out of the unit, tossed it on the passenger seat, and drove without stopping until the sun rose over San Antonio. He told himself it was a glitch, radio interference, a weird dream, a leftover hallucination from a long-haul lifestyle finally catching up to him. Then, 3 weeks later, he saw the station again. He was driving east through Alice, nowhere near. TX to 186 when that same red glow peeked through the mesquite trees. Same sign, same pump. Same man waving slowly like he'd never stopped. Dean kept driving, didn't slow, didn't look, but the next morning, when he checked his fuel tank, it was full. And on his dashboard sat a receipt, still blank, still folded perfectly, except this. Time on the bottom corner, a new word had appeared, scribbled in crooked handwriting like a child learning to write. Welcome back. The wind along I-37 that night howled like it was chasing something. Maybe it was. Miles of blacktop stretched out ahead of Darren Keller, a seasoned trucker who'd hauled loads from San Antonio to Corpus Christi more times than he could count. It was a dead stretch of highway, nothing but ranchland, rest stops, and the occasional wandering coyote. He liked it that way. No drama, just asphalt and time to think. That night, though, something was off. Not wrong, exactly. Just uneasy. Like the air inside his cab was thicker than it ought to be, like the shadows were watching instead of just hanging. Darren hadn't picked up a hitchhiker. He didn't even stop for gas after leaving the Loves in Three Rivers. He kept the cab locked out of habit. He'd made a mental note of that. Yet sometime after 2 a.m., halfway between Oakville and Mathis, he heard the first snore. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was almost drowned out by the hum of the tires on the road and the low rumble of the engine. But it was there, gentle, rhythmic, unmistakable. A human breath, pulled in slow, held for a moment, and let out with a slight rattle, like someone sleeping deeply in the bunk behind him. He glanced in the mirror and saw only darkness. The curtain that separated the cab from the sleeper was drawn halfway closed, swaying lightly. He told himself it was probably just the wind or the tires or his own damn sinuses playing tricks. But he turned the dashcam monitor on anyway. His setup was basic. A wired dash cam up front and a cheap rear cab cam facing the sleeper area, mostly for theft prevention. It was hooked into the monitor clip beside the steering wheel. Darren reached over and tapped the screen. Static for a second, then it flickered into a dim, gray-hued night vision feed. And there it was. The shape, not a shadow, not a trick of the curtain, a distinct outline of a person lying in his sleeper bunk. Shoulders hunched up, back toward the camera, knees pulled in. Breathing slow and steady. Darren froze, his foot lifting slightly off the accelerator. He didn't swerve, didn't slam the brakes, he was too seasoned for that. But his heart pounded like a jackhammer in his chest. He looked up through the windshield, then back at the screen. Still there, still breathing, still snoring. His first thought was maybe someone climbed in when he left the truck unattended at the fuel stop earlier, but that was over 2 hours ago. And he'd been in the truck the whole time. He remembered the parking lot clearly. It was nearly empty. No one loitering around. No one near enough to slip and unseen. And even if they had, how the hell had they gone unnoticed this long? He reached for the small drawer by his left leg, pulled it open, and slid his fingers over the cold handle of the wrench he kept there. No gun never liked them, but that wrench had made a few bad nights a little safer. He flicked the hazard lights on and pulled onto the shoulder, crunching gravel and dry grass under his tires. The truck hissed as it settled. He waited a beat, engine idling, monitor humming with that greenish video feed. The figure hadn't moved. He killed the engine, grabbed the wrench, and unbuckled slowly. Every creak in the cab echoed like a scream. The wind outside moaned and rattled the trailer. He turned and yanked the curtain aside. Empty. His breath caught. The sleeper bunk was there, blanket folded, pillow flat, nothing disturbed. No body. No sign anyone had ever been there. But when he looked back at the monitor, the figure was still visible, still curled up, still snoring. A live feed from a space that no longer matched what his eyes saw. He touched the bedding. Cold, dry, clean. He checked the doors. Still locked, windows up. He opened the back panel to the sleeper. Empty. Then, just for the hell of it, he knocked on the bunk. Wall. The snoring stopped. Only on the screen. The air went thick then, like the pressure dropped inside the cab. He could hear his own heartbeat. In his ears? On the monitor, the figure rolled slightly, as if shifting in sleep, and then settled again. No snoring this time. Just stillness. Darren stepped back, suddenly aware of how much smaller the cab felt. He could see the whole space with his own eyes. Empty. But the camera said otherwise. He turned the feed off. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe. The cam froze on a weird artifact, like when an old VHS paused and left ghost images behind. That was it. Had to be. Darren climbed back into the seat, started the engine, and pulled back onto the road. He didn't look at the monitor again for miles. He just drove, watching the shoulder, watching the shadows stretch across the road, stretching too far sometimes, like they were reaching Dot by the time he passed Mathis. The snoring had started again. This time, it wasn't faint. It was wet, ragged, like someone drowning slowly in their dreams. He reached out and flicked the monitor on again. The figure was still there, but something had changed. It was bigger now, no longer lying down. It was sitting, hunched over at the edge of the bunk, face hidden by a mop of greasy hair, hands limp between its knees, breathing shallow and rapid. Darren's skin crawled. He couldn't hear it move, but every few seconds, the image flickered, its head tilted a little more, its shoulders a little lower, like it was unraveling right there behind him. He slammed the brakes. This time he did pull the curtain again. Still. Nothing. Still empty. But the second he turned back toward the windshield, he saw it in the reflection of the passenger window. Not a shadow. Not a trick. A man, or what used to be one, sitting behind him in the sleeper. Eyes like ink spills, hollow, mouth barely open, and the faint glisten of teeth. Grinning, he spun around and it was gone. Again. Nothing. He drove the rest of the way with every dome light on. Music up, windows cracked. He told himself it had to be some kind of hallucination, a trick of the monitor, overwork, highway hypnosis. But when he got to the drop yard in Corpus Christi and handed the load paperwork over, one of the dock guys pointed toward his cab and said, "Didn't know you had company, man." Darren stiffened. "What?" "Just thought I saw someone sitting behind you when you pulled in." He didn't answer, just nodded. That night, he slept in the driver's lounge, left the truck locked tight, lights off, engine cold. In the morning, he went to review the dashcam footage just to prove he wasn't crazy. The footage was corrupt. Every segment between 2 a.m. and 4:30 was a glitchy mess of static and flickers of movement, just enough to see the thing sitting up, looking into the lens. Reaching forward, he scrubbed through one frame at a time. Right at 3:17 a.m., there was a single clear shot. The thing was staring straight into the camera, head tilted, eyes gone. No nose, just folds of flesh. And under it, etched into the wall of the sleeper behind it, were the words, "I never left." Darren sold the truck 2 days later. He drives short hauls now, never after midnight. Never alone. And never ever with a sleeper cab. Ricky Tulliver wasn't new to the road. 27 years behind the wheel, most of them spent crisscrossing Texas highways. Backroads and lonely desert routes had carved the kind of lines into his face that no mirror could smooth out. That stretch from Van Horn up SH 54 all the way toward Del City was supposed to be routine. A basic overnight run with 4 other drivers, all loaded up with steel beams for a warehouse build site outside El Paso. 5 rigs total. Ricky, Carl, Junebug, Hector, and Marty. They left together just before dusk. The dispatch was timed so they'd hit the last leg near dawn. That road, SH 54, was a straight line through the emptiest land Ricky ever knew. High desert, mostly flat, but with those mountains off to the east that looked like busted knuckles, punched up out of the dirt. He'd driven that road dozens of times. Never gave it much thought. Until that night. The sky was turning gold behind them as they passed the last gas station in Van Horn. Ricky topped off just to be safe, grabbed a bag of sunflower seeds, and fell into line behind Marty. Junebug and Hector were behind him, and Carl brought up the rear. The radios were full of bad jokes and FM static. Country boys barking about the Dallas game, Marty laughing like a drunk walrus, like always. But something started to feel wrong about an hour in. Ricky couldn't explain it then, not fully. Just a pressure, a slowness to the road. Like time had thickened, or maybe his own thoughts had. The sun dropped faster than usual, it seemed, and when the dark came down, it came thick, heavy, all at once. The kind of night where the sky swallows the stars and the road stops looking like asphalt and starts looking like water. That's when the radio started, cutting out. Marty's voice clipped mid-sentence. A story about some bar in Marfa, then nothing. But a hiss. Ricky tapped the dial, flipped channels, nothing. Just dead air. He tried his CB, called out, "You boys copy?" Silence. He slowed a little, checked his mirrors. Tail lights, 4 sets, all still there. He could see Hector's rig weaving slightly, just like always, and Carl's big chrome. Front glinting behind him. Everything looked normal. But something didn't feel right. And when he looked up again, the road had changed. No signs, no shoulder lines, no fences. Just blacktop running forward like a vein across the land. The desert was gone. No cactus, no brush, no telephone poles, not even a distant hill. Just void. Just that endless 2-lane stretch floating in darkness. He blinked hard and rubbed his eyes. Too much caffeine, maybe not enough sleep. He popped a sunflower seed in his mouth and bit down hard. It grounded him briefly. He tried the CB again. "Carl, come back." Nothing. Then Junebug's voice, faint, warbled, like it was coming from underwater. ... Ricky ... Something's wrong with ... Carl's. Static swallowed the rest. Ricky's stomach twisted. He hit the brakes a little, just enough to ease back. Hector's rig passed him, then slowed to match. He flicked his lights at him, twice fast, once slow, their little code. Pull over. Hector's brake lights flared. They both pulled to the shoulder, only Ricky couldn't see what shoulder they were on. When his truck stopped, it didn't bounce. It should have. It always bounced a little, even on flat ground. But this felt like sinking into sponge. He opened his door and stepped out. No crunch of gravel under his boots. No wind. No sound at all. Just black. His headlights cut a hole maybe. 20 feet out. The land around them wasn't land, it was colorless. No texture. No smell. He looked to Hector's rig and felt cold bloom in his chest. It was empty. Lights on. Engine running. Cab door open. No Hector. He ran toward it. Clambered up the side. Empty. No trace. Not a jacket. Not a wallet. Not a thermos. Just gone, like he'd never been there. That's when the horns started. Distant, but rising. Truck horns. 5 of them, maybe more. Crying out from ahead, behind, all directions. Wailing, but not like trucks trying to warn anyone. More like pain, mourning. Screaming metal. Ricky turned back toward his own rig and froze. There were shapes on the road. Black against black. Only visible because they moved. Tall, spindly, like telephone poles with legs. No faces, but their heads tilted. He swore they did, watching him. Some had long fingers like cables, swaying. One stepped onto the road behind his truck, its limbs twitching like broken antennae in the wind. He didn't think. He ran. He made it to the cab, slammed the door, locked it, threw it into gear. Mirrors filled with shadows, then nothing. Just road. He didn't stop driving. Not for hours. Not until the sun rose behind him and the world came back. Trees, signs. Birds, brush, color, sound. He hit the junction near Del City alone. He called dispatch. They told him the other 4 trucks never left the station. Manifest said they checked in, but no logs. No way station hits. No GPS. Nothing. He argued, screamed, swore up and down he'd seen them. Heard them. They filed a missing persons report. Weeks. Past. No one found the trucks. No tire marks on H54. No debris. No black boxes pinged. Nothing. But Ricky never drove that route again. He quit 3 months later. Moved to Kansas. Bought a farm. Started raising chickens. But some nights, when the moon's thin and the fields are quiet, he swears he hears diesel engines in the distance. A convoy approaching. And sometimes, just as sleep takes him, the sound of truck horns. Wailing. Calling him back.